Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Chapter 21. You're an absolute pussy. Soldier Boy's gaze made it harder for Homelander to breathe than any roaring ever could. Homelander stood up, not knowing what to say. He detected the disappointment in Soldier Boy's eyes. There even seemed to be a trace of exhaustion in his look, as if saying, "I knew it would be like this, but I still hoped you wouldn't." Homelander's face lost all its color in an instant. He parted his lips, wanting to say something. But the explanation died in his throat, pushed right back by Benjamin's silent gaze. Because Homelander knew all too well that regardless of what he had been thinking just now, and regardless of whether he had ultimately given in, he had been just a single step away from turning back into that pussy manipulated by Madeline's milk. Madeline stood up from the sofa, pulling at her crumpled neckline in an attempt to restore some semblance of decency. "Mr. Soldier Boy, I think this is a misunderstanding." "Shut the fuck up, you filthy old whore. If you're starving for a man, go find an old beggar on the street," Benjamin said. Madeline's mouth snapped shut. She was terrified that Benjamin's shield would suddenly come crashing down on her head. Benjamin didn't look at her again. His gaze remained fixed entirely on Homelander, lingering for a few agonizing seconds before he turned and walked out. The sound of his footsteps gradually faded down the corridor, each stride trampling directly on Homelander's chest. The room was left with nothing but the faint hum of the air conditioner and Madeline's rapid, uneven breathing. Homelander stood in place, his hands hanging down at his sides, clenched into tight fists. Madeline reached out, intending to touch his shoulder, but he sidestepped to avoid her. That evasive maneuver was cleaner and more decisive than any before it, completely devoid of hesitation. "Get out, now," Homelander said. Madeline stood behind him, her lips moving slightly, but ultimately she said nothing. Bending down to grab her handbag from the sofa, she walked toward the doorway in her high heels. Passing by the blasted outdoor slab, her footsteps paused for a fraction of a second before she hurried out. When Homelander tells someone to leave, they absolutely must leave. That was the golden rule when dealing with Homelander. Those who didn't leave usually didn't get to leave ever again. Homelander stood alone in the empty room. Before him lay the metal door slab that his father had violently kicked off its hinges. There was a deep boot print embedded in the metal. He stepped forward, squatted down, and reached out to touch the imprint. Soon after, Homelander followed him. When he burst into the executive director's office, Benjamin was already there, knowing Homelander would come. Homelander walked over and came to a halt right in front of Benjamin's desk. The edge of his cape swayed gently behind him before falling still. Homelander's hands hung down at his sides, his shoulders slightly tensed, his lips parting as if wanting to speak but not knowing where to begin. He rarely felt like his tongue weighed much, but right now, it felt as though it had been filled with concrete. Benjamin stood up, and then he raised his right hand. Homelander's pupils contracted, his body reacted a step ahead of his brain, his neck involuntarily ducked, and his shoulders instinctively hitched up half an inch. The most powerful soup on earth, when faced with his father's raised hand, actually flinched as his default reaction. He was waiting for the fist to come down, like the punch on the rooftop, or the strike delivered to his shoulder in the conference room. And truthfully, he was used to it. From childhood onward, making a mistake meant being punished. The lab researchers punished him for not cooperating with tests, various technicians punished him when his performance wasn't good enough, and Vought punished him when he was disobedient. So it made perfect sense for his father to punish him too, because he had been a disappointment. But the fist didn't fall. Benjamin's hand hovered in midair, remaining poised just above Homelander's ducked head, before pulling back. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Homelander slowly lifted his head, looking toward Benjamin. His expression was ridden with pure confusion. Benjamin looked at him, slowly bringing down that hovering hand to rest it against the back of his head. "You thought I was going to hit you?" Benjamin asked. Homelander looked up, parting his lips, his voice raspy. "I thought you were disappointed in me." "I am disappointed in you," Benjamin said, slowly withdrawing his hand. "Look at yourself. An absolute fucking pussy. You really are a massive goddamn disappointment to me." Homelander's face turned white as a sheet. So he really was a disappointment after all. He felt that being insulted with those words by his father felt worse than taking a few punches. It stung far deeper than any physical beating. I was about to refuse, his words began to stumble incoherently. "Even if you hadn't stopped me, I still wouldn't have done it." The way you were looking at that old whore, you looked like you were ready to fucking drool over her. Homelander opened his mouth. What the fuck is your relationship with that old hag anyway? Benjamin lowered his voice. Fucking buddies, or some Motherson roleplay. If it were the former, it wouldn't make me this goddamn angry. After all, that's just your private life and none of my business. But when I walked in, it looked like you two had something way weirder going on than just a basic hookup. Homelander stood there, panic plastered across his face. Did you sleep with her? Benjamin asked. Homelander hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Then do me a favor and stop looking at Madeline like she's your fucking elder, alright? She's just a goddamn hookup. You use her, throw her onto the bed, pull up your pants, and walk out the door. Homelander nodded again. Madeline wasn't a mother, nor was she an elder. In fact, she was highly likely one of the Vought executives who had framed Soldier Boy. Besides, Madeline's heart had been racing just now, she was definitely lying. Benjamin watched him nod several times in succession, falling silent for a few seconds before taking a step forward and reaching out to pat him on the shoulder. Accompany me for a drink tonight. Homelander looked up. He had never had alcohol before. I'm not saying a grown man can't drink milk, Benjamin said, pulling his hand back. But I expect you to drink it like a man, regardless of what kind of goddamn female animal it's coming from, not like some helpless baby. Come on, you're the most powerful soup on the planet. Act like the number one entity in the world. You're not just going to be the number one soup, you're going to be the number one man. Homelander stood in place, chewing over those words in his mind. As a man, not an infant. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. What should we drink? Homelander asked. Beers first, then the hard liquor. Benjamin walked over to the doorway, casting a backward glance at him. Your treat. Those goddamn corporate fucks at Vought haven't paid me yet. Chapter 22. My son is the most powerful soup on earth. The first ray of morning sunlight squeezed through the gap in the poorly drawn curtains, tracing a thin gold line across the carpet. Homelander lay in his bed. A gray cashmere blanket covered him, its edges neatly tucked in. Of course, he hadn't tucked them in himself, he never did that sort of thing. The apartment door clicked shut softly. Footsteps faded down the corridor, steady, heavy. Benjamin was gone. Homelander opened his eyes the exact moment the door shut. He wasn't drunk. His compound of enhanced physiology metabolized alcohol over 10 times faster than an ordinary person's. The kick from those few glasses of whiskey had lasted less than 20 minutes before being completely broken down. He had been sober the entire time. He had been sober when Benjamin pushed the third glass of whiskey toward him in the bar and said, "Drink slower, don't choke like a pussy." He had been sober when he pretended to pass out on the table, and when Benjamin slung one of his arms over his shoulder, half dragging, half carrying him back to Vought Tower. And he had been completely sober just moments ago. With his eyes closed, Homelander had felt a blanket shaken out and gently draped over him. The movement was clumsy and stiff, clearly not the work of hands accustomed to doing such things. Then, he felt that hand hover above his head for 2 seconds. With his abilities, he could distinctly feel a warm palm suspended in the air, seemingly hesitating whether to descend before ultimately pulling back. Once the door clicked shut, Homelander opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He took a deep breath. Eating with family, drinking with his father, being carried home after getting drunk, having someone tuck you in. In the world of ordinary people, these things were completely routine from childhood. But it had taken him nearly 40 years to taste it for the first time. He rolled over, burying his face in the blanket, a subtle curve rising on his lips that even he didn't realize was there. Ding. You have made Homelander feel the discipline of a strict father, as well as the heavy weight of a loving father's affection. Though he was genuinely upset when he heard you were disappointed, your encouragement made him incredibly happy. Furthermore, you are teaching him how to become a real man and a true good boy. Reward acquired. Nuclear Energy Blast LV3 upgraded to LV4. Current abilities. Nuclear Energy Blast LV4 can release high-intensity radioactive energy capable of incinerating anything and burning away the compound V inside a target's body. Super Strength LV6 possesses the top-tier super strength of elite soups. Super Defense LV5 invulnerable, immune to conventional firearms and most soup attacks. Self-Healing LV5 extremely high cellular activity, capable of rapidly repairing fatal wounds. Radiation resistance LV5 completely immune to nuclear radiation and all harmful rays. Super speed LV1 possesses the speed of a standard soup. Eternal youth, physical form permanently remains at its peak. Fuck. Having departed, Benjamin was a bit speechless. Where was his super speed or super flight? Why did the system keep rewarding abilities that weren't exactly everyday necessities? Still, an upgraded nuclear energy blast would probably reduce the cooldown of his radioactive explosions and increase the damage output. Soldier Boy figured he was currently on par with the Season 5 Homelander who had taken the Temp V or V1 formula, maybe even slightly stronger. That was assuming his goddamn son didn't use super speed and flight to run circles around him. 9 a.m., Vought Tower. When Benjamin stepped out of the elevator, he spotted Starlight standing outside his office from a distance. She wasn't wearing her gold suit today, having changed into a dark blue training uniform with her hair tied back in a high ponytail. She looked as sharp and energized as a freshly ejected bullet casing. Clutching her phone, she kept swiping across the screen, an excitement radiating from her face that she couldn't suppress if she tried. "Did you win the fucking lottery?" Benjamin walked up to the door, pulling out his keys. Starlight looked up, her eyes bright enough to double as flashlights. "No, Mr. Soldier Boy. Last night on my way back to my apartment, I caught two guys cornering a girl in an alley." Benjamin's hand paused over the keyhole, and he turned to look at her. "Ah, the Season 1 plotline. You won't be smiling in a minute, you dumb little bitch. I beat the crap out of them." Starlight spoke rapidly, as if she had been holding it in all morning and had finally found someone to vent to. "Two criminals. One tried to run, so I grabbed him by the collar, threw him back, and slammed him into a dumpster. The other one tried to fight back, so I flattened him." Benjamin pushed open the door, rested his shield against the desk, sat down in his chair, and looked at her. "Good job, Starlight," he said. "Even though you look incredibly naive, like a total dumbass, no, a complete dipshit, I'm still happy for you regarding this." Ignoring the profanity, Starlight stood by the door, thoroughly pleased. "Thank you, Mr. Soldier Boy. You're a really good person. By the way, the reason I'm calling you a dumbass is because PR is going to cause trouble for you in a minute. But don't pay any attention to them, I'll back your stupid ass up," Benjamin said. "You saw two guys hounding a woman, and you stepped in and kicked their asses. That's called actual goddamn heroism. In the future, whenever you run into something like this, as long as you're sure it's the right thing to do, go right ahead. Got it? Ignore the PR department when they come crawling to cause problems." Starlight blinked, completely caught off guard. She hadn't considered that. Surely they won't. PR. Soldier Boy waved his hand, dismissing her. Right on cue, Ashley materialized with a tense look, clicking her high heels as she led Starlight away. Following Ashley, Starlight cautiously watched the woman's panicked expression, her mind drifting back to the crude vocabulary that had just spilled out of Soldier Boy's mouth. After receiving a massive lecture from corporate, Starlight hung her head and slinked back into Benjamin's office. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. That's exactly why I said this fucking place is rotten to the core. Always chasing profits, always putting on a goddamn performance. You probably know by now, those miserable Vought scripts they hand out, full of superheroes fighting crime, but those criminals are just paid actors. Yet when an actual crime happens where a superhero should step in, Vought tells you to stand down. If this place isn't completely fucking rotten, I don't know what is. Benjamin bitched, ripping into Vought. "Sir, I think you're right." Starlight nodded, looking at Benjamin as a spark flickered in her eyes. Perhaps Soldier Boy, Homelander, and Queen Maeve were the only real superheroes left. Oh, and herself, of course. Ignore the goddamn PR department, ignore Vought, and just go do your good deeds. Fuck you. Benjamin pointed a finger at Starlight. Flushed, Starlight ignored the final curse aimed at her. She knew it was just Soldier Boy's catchphrase, not a literal insult directed at her. "Thank you so much, sir." Finishing her sentence, she suddenly remembered something, pulled her phone from her pocket to check the time, and quickly added, "Sir, would you like to grab lunch together at noon? There's an Italian restaurant downstairs." Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "Sure." Starlight spun around and walked out of the office, her steps as light as if she were walking on springs. 11:50 a.m. Homelander stepped out of the elevator, his hair styled flawlessly. He had intentionally arrived 10 minutes early, planning to chat with his father about what happened after they went drinking yesterday, like whether he had said anything embarrassing while wasted, or how his father had managed to carry him back. Plus, there was the event scheduled for this afternoon. Going over these questions in his head, a casual smile resting on his face, he rounded the corner of the corridor and walked up to Benjamin's office. The door was open, but the room was empty. Pulling out his phone, he absent-mindedly scrolled to Starlight's social media page. The latest update had been posted 3 minutes ago, featuring a photo of a freshly served plate of pasta. The location tag pinned the Italian restaurant right beneath Vought Tower, and sitting in the background of the shot was Benjamin, looking ridiculously handsome. Homelander shrugged his shoulders and spread his hands. Well, his old man was hitting on girls, he couldn't exactly object. Homelander dialed Maeve, but she was busy too. 3 p.m., Vought Tower press briefing room. Reporters from major national media outlets packed all 300 seats to capacity. The camera crews in the back rows formed a dense matrix of lenses, every single one aimed dead at the two figures on stage. The camera flashes erupted like an unending thunderstorm. Homelander stood before the microphone clad in his signature suit, his cape draping perfectly straight behind his back. Benjamin stood half a step to his left, his shield slung over his left arm, his deep green suit reflecting a quiet luster under the relentless bombardment of flashes. "Today, I have an announcement for the American people." Homelander's voice was clear and solemn, carrying a layer of gravity rarely seen on him. "Soldier Boy, Benjamin, from this day forward, is my father. This is not a script, this is not a Vought PR stunt, and this is not orchestrated by anyone. He is my biological father. In the literal, scientific sense, and I am proudly claiming him." The room fell dead silent for 1 full second. Then the flashes exploded, the rapid shutter clicks so dense that you couldn't even hear your own heartbeat. Countless hands shot into the air at once, every single reporter shouting out a question. Vought's PR department had arranged a dedicated Q&A segment for them. A female reporter from CNN was the first to stand, pointing her microphone toward Homelander. "Mr. Homelander, publicly acknowledging a previously unrevealed paternal relationship, what does this signify in your life?" "It means everything," Homelander said. "He is the first real family I've ever had in my life." The reporter turned to Benjamin. "Mr. Soldier Boy, do you have anything you'd like to share?" Benjamin mulled it over for a moment, then pulled the microphone toward himself. "Hello everyone, I'm Soldier Boy. Actually, fuck that, the whole world knows who the hell I am, why am I using an introduction? Goddamn Vought, Edgar, fuck you." The reporters exchanged blank stares. Benjamin looked a bit annoyed, but soon continued, "As for what I want to say, my son is the most powerful soup on earth. From now on, I'm going to teach him exactly how to be a real superhero and actually serve the people. But before that happens, if anyone tries to mess with my son," he paused, "they'll have to go through me first, motherfuckers." Reporters from several veteran media outlets lowered their heads to frantically take notes. A young female reporter looked toward Soldier Boy, a trace of adoration surfacing in her eyes. Homelander glanced sideways at Benjamin, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. Chapter 23, Hot Cola. Too fucking amateur. "Mr. Soldier Boy, here is your drink." The interview was still underway, camera flashes erupting in a relentless, crackling storm. A staff member holding a tray carefully navigated around the mess of cables on the floor, placing a beverage on the table beside Benjamin. Benjamin was currently being hounded by one reporter after another. These reporters were asking way too many goddamn questions, and he was already getting visibly irritated. His face was as grim as a block of iron. Then, he casually picked up the cup. The moment his fingertips made contact with the glass, his expression shifted instantly. Hot, he brought the cup beneath his nose and sniffed. It was sweet, carrying a warm, caramelly aroma. Cola, and it was hot. Someone had actually served him a cup of hot cola. "Is this fucking hot?" Benjamin bolted to his feet, his chair letting out a sharp, ear-piercing screech behind him. He slammed the cup violently onto the floor. The glass shattered instantly, sending the warm, dark brown liquid splattering everywhere. Several reporters in the front row flinched backward in fright. The flashes halted for a fraction of a second before erupting at an even more frenzied pace. After all, other superheroes always put on a polite and refined front, at least when the cameras were rolling. But Soldier Boy. A few younger reporters who weren't entirely familiar with Soldier Boy's reputation began snapping photos like absolute lunatics. Fuck. Too fucking amateur. I want ice. 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 The staff member's face turned white as a sheet. Backing away repeatedly, he nearly stepped right onto the shattered glass on the floor. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll replace it right away. And bring my son an iced cola too, Benjamin demanded, pointing a finger to his side. Homelander was currently sitting perfectly proper in his chair. If it comes out hot again, you're fucking finished here. The staff member practically ran out of the room. Looking at the shattered glass on the floor, the corner of Homelander's mouth twitched slightly, though he didn't dare laugh out loud. A few reporters covered their mouths, their shoulders shaking with suppressed amusement. The director on set let out a wail through the earpieces, and the PR department immediately began frantically drafting an apology statement. PR better not apologize. Is hot cola meant for human consumption? You tell me. Fuck you. Having spat out his piece, Benjamin sat back down. He adjusted the gauntlets of his suit as if nothing out of the ordinary had just occurred, then tilted his chin toward the stunned crowd of reporters below. Next question. Quick, 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 don't waste my time. After the press conference concluded, Benjamin went straight back to Vought Tower. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing out the noise of the reporters and the blinding camera flashes. Leaning against the mirrored wall of the elevator, he closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Dealing with the media was more exhausting than fighting a war, especially that pathetic hot cola incident. Dogs wouldn't even drink that shit. Homelander hadn't returned with him, mostly because Translucent had been missing for 2 days now. He wanted to investigate it. It wasn't that he actually cared about Translucent, the guy was a piece of shit anyway, but a grown soup vanishing into thin air right inside Vought Tower, let alone a member of the Seven, was an incident that made him inherently uncomfortable. Because Homelander had previously blasted the records clerk who stood in the way of his files, his search through the surveillance footage and intelligence channels went exceptionally smoothly. No one dared to stand in his way. The following morning, Benjamin stepped out of the elevator, holding his first beverage of the day, an iced cola. As he rounded the corner of the corridor, his footsteps suddenly slowed down. Starlight was standing right in front of the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the hallway, her back turned to him. She wasn't wearing the modest suit she usually wore. Instead, she was clad in an outfit he had never seen before, a plunging v-neck that cut almost all the way down to her belly button, a skirt so short it barely managed to cover the base of her thighs, and an entire back completely exposed from her shoulder blades to her waistline. Her long blonde hair had been styled into voluminous, flowing waves, cascading over her bare shoulders. One of her hands rested against the window frame, her shoulders trembling slightly. Benjamin strode over. Before he could even open his mouth, he saw that her eyes were completely bloodshot, her mascara smudged slightly by tears, leaving a faint black streak across her lower eyelid. What the fuck are you wearing? Benjamin's voice wasn't loud, but his tone was freezing cold. He gave her a thorough look from head to toe, his brow furrowing into a tight knot. Dressed like a total slut. You're a superhero, what the hell is the point of wearing something this exposing? Starlight's lips trembled violently. She wiped the corner of her eye harshly with the back of her hand, trying her best to keep her voice from shaking, but failed completely. It's Madeline. She said my suit wasn't marketable enough. She said audiences don't want to see a female hero bundled up tightly. PR handed me this new suit, and she told me that if I refuse to wear it, I'm actively harming Vought's interests and letting down the fans who support me. Taking a deep breath, her voice grew steadily quieter. I tried to refuse, but she told me Vought's contract clearly states that suit designs fall strictly under corporate decision-making, and I have zero right to decline. She also said that with the Deep gone, the Seven is short-staffed right now. If I won't cooperate, there are plenty of people lined up who are more than willing to take my place. Benjamin said nothing. He placed his iced cola on the windowsill, turned around, and marched right back down the other end of the corridor. 2 interns carrying equipment down the hallway saw him approaching and immediately pinned themselves against the wall to clear a path. One of them nearly dropped the cardboard box in his hands. Ashley's office was located right around the corner of the corridor. She was currently sitting behind her desk, cross-referencing media drafts on her computer screen. Hearing the door shove open, she looked up and locked eyes with Benjamin's expressionless face, a look carrying enough raw pressure to make anyone's heart stop on the spot. The pen in her hand dropped. Mr. Soldier Boy, is there something wrong? Did you approve Starlight's fucking suit? Ashley swallowed hard. It was a direct directive from Madeline. I'm just executing it. I have absolutely zero decision-making authority. You're the director of PR, and you have no decision-making power. Then what the fuck do we even need you for? Useless piece of trash. Benjamin stood before her desk, delivering each word with deliberate weight. Ashley's face drained of color. Because it really hadn't been her call. Benjamin demanded, I'm giving you 10 minutes. Get Madeline down to my office. Ashley nodded frantically. Her fingers were shaking so badly that it took her 3 attempts just to dial Madeline's number. When Madeline arrived, Benjamin was waiting for her inside his office, and Starlight had been called over as well. Starlight had already changed back into her original suit. That exposing, hooker-like outfit had been tossed carelessly onto the floor. Madeline pushed open the door, taking in the new suit on the ground, and then Starlight standing securely behind Benjamin, her lips curved into her standard, practiced smile. Mr. Soldier Boy, regarding Starlight's suit, I can explain. Explain what? Benjamin turned around. His voice wasn't loud, but he cut her off instantly. Explain how you dress a superhero up like a goddamn whore, a stripper. She's in her early 20s, fought her way all the way from Des Moines to New York, passed every single layer of your screenings, and beat out how many competitors just to stand here. She has superpowers, she has guts, motherfucker. Just the night before last she beat down 2 harassers with her bare hands. And then you tell her, no, your abilities don't matter, your courage doesn't matter, you have to flash your tits for the audience first. Why don't you come to work naked? Madeline's corporate smile froze completely. This is the result of market research. Female superhero merchandise sales. Don't give me that market research bullshit, Benjamin glared dead at her. If you're so fucking capable, have you ever designed a plunging V-neck suit for a train? Have you ever had translucent wear a thong on camera? Or let Homelander go rescue people naked for a shoot? Why the fuck does Starlight have to dress like a goddamn hooker? Because she's a woman, because you think a woman's body is worth more than her actual capabilities. Fuck you. Madeline forcefully suppressed her rising fury. Benjamin barked, Ashley. Ashley, who had been cowering by the doorway, practically sprung into the room. Here. Starlight's suit stays exactly like her original design. She wears whatever the fuck she wants. If anyone tries to make an issue out of her body again, I'll throw their desk straight out of the 56th floor. Yes, sir, Ashley nodded like a woodpecker. Handling it right away, immediately. Madeline wanted to say something, parting her lips, but under Benjamin's heavy stare, she ultimately snapped her mouth shut. She turned and marched out of the office, her face absolute iron, the click of her high heels hitting the floor twice as loudly as usual. But Benjamin didn't waste a single spare glance on her. Starlight stood in the corner, watching Soldier Boy use the crudest language to speak her absolute mind. He said her abilities matter, her courage matters, she herself matters, not her tits, and not the corporate hype. Hearing these words, each one sounded as rough as sandpaper, but they burned inside her ears until she felt like crying. Her eyes were still red, but it was no longer out of grievance. Thank you, Mr. Soldier Boy. Go be a real superhero. If anyone dares to threaten you, come find me, as long as what you're doing is right. Starlight nodded. She was incredibly grateful Vought International had Soldier Boy. Chapter 24. Madeline almost dies. Towards evening, a knock sounded on Benjamin's office door. He looked up. Madeline stood at the entrance, wearing an exceptionally daring deep red dress, its neckline plunging even lower than Starlight's new suit. She leaned against the door frame, holding a glass of whiskey, her lips coated in a darker red lipstick than usual. She had spent the entire afternoon preparing for this entrance. In her eyes, Soldier Boy was still a man, and men always had weaknesses. Especially since Vought International's records indicated that Soldier Boy seemed to prefer mature women, much like Homelander. And she was highly mature. Moreover, when Soldier Boy had cursed at her earlier, he had used a "fuck you," so perhaps he genuinely meant it. Since Madeline couldn't handle him with conventional corporate tactics, she was going to try a different approach to lock down Benjamin, matching the exact way he had degraded her. Good evening, Mr. Soldier Boy. Her voice was dropped a few notches lower than usual, dragging out the final syllables. I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding between us. Why don't we? Benjamin gave her a sideways glance, speaking expressionlessly. You have the wrong floor. Madeline's corporate smile froze completely. What the fuck are you doing in my office dressed like that? To talk about work, or do you want me to fuck you? You're disgusting, you know that. You haggard old bird. Benjamin gave her a thorough look from head to toe, his eyes entirely devoid of any emotion. Whatever the fuck you're trying to do, I'm not interested. The door's right over there. Roll out. You're making me fucking sick. Fuck. Madeline stood at the threshold, her fingers tightening around the whiskey glass until her knuckles turned white. Her lips moved slightly, wanting to fire back. But Benjamin had already lowered his head, resuming his look at the files in his hands, acting as though she wasn't worth more of his time than a misplaced punctuation mark on the page. She turned and marched out. Then, Madeline crossed paths with Homelander, who was currently staring dead at her with a dark, brooding expression. Madeline froze in her tracks. Madeline, Homelander's tone was freezing cold. You make me fucking sick. I really want to kill you. I can explain. I was just going to look for you, but I couldn't find you, so I. Get out. Get the fuck away from me right now, before I change my mind. Move. Homelander lowered his head, forcefully suppressing his rising fury as he waved his hand. Madeline could only scramble to leave immediately. When Homelander tells someone to leave, they leave. Staying behind usually means ending up dead. That was a golden rule that a vast number of employees at Vought International had learned the hard way. Late night, Madeline sat alone in her office, clutching the glass of whiskey she had failed to deliver. The New York nightscape outside the window was as brilliant as ever, but looking at those lights, she only found them glaring. Homelander refused to listen to her anymore. Soldier Boy had berated her into absolute submission. Both father and son despised her. The alternative plan she had spent the entire afternoon meticulously preparing had been torn to shreds by his insults, and she had even been caught red-handed by Homelander. The core issue remained Soldier Boy, Vought's massive threat. This man possessed almost zero weaknesses. She had previously written this phrase in her report to the board of directors, but only tonight did she truly comprehend its full weight. Perhaps Soldier Boy's single vulnerability was Homelander. But Homelander didn't have weaknesses anymore either. His prior vulnerability was being starved of affection, but Soldier Boy's arrival had completely patched that up. Neither of them had weaknesses because of each other. Damn it, it was so perfect. She took a sip of the whiskey, the liquor swirling over her tongue, incredibly bitter. Meanwhile, Benjamin leaned back in his office chair, his feet propped up on the edge of the desk as he flipped through the latest roster of the 7 on his tablet. The Deep had been fired, Translucent was missing, A-Train was keeping his tail tucked between his legs, Starlight had changed into a new suit, and Maeve had actively sent him a message today praising him for roasting Madeline so well. Homelander, his son, had actively gone to investigate Translucent's disappearance today. He had also completely broken ties with Madeline. Vought was already losing its grip on Homelander, on himself, and on the 7. He picked up his iced cola from the desk and took a sip. Outside the window, the New York night sky possessed an amber glow from the countless city lights, the Hudson River flowing silently in the distance. He recalled the phrase the legend had uttered in his apartment that day, "You planning on sitting down to have dinner with them?" Dinner. Hey, it won't be long before they get kicked off the table completely. Goddamn Vought. Benjamin was pleased. Homelander arrived at the door and knocked. Benjamin didn't intend to just take Homelander out for drinks tonight, instead, they were heading out for some late-night skewers. While there weren't many American barbecue options, there were always Chinese barbecue joints around. This wasn't some small town, this was New York, the most prosperous city on the planet. The following morning, Vought Tower Tactical Briefing Room. Madeline stood before the electronic screen, her finger tracing a real-time aerial map. Midtown Manhattan, a 42-story commercial building. The rooftop helipad was merely a small gray square on the display. Her expression was tighter than usual, radiating humiliation and tightly coiled anger. Primarily, the memory of that deep red dress and the utter disgrace of, "You have the wrong floor," was still churning violently in her stomach. Worse, she had nearly been slaughtered by Homelander because of it. But right now, Madeline had zero time to digest her personal feelings. The situation is as follows: a 42-story commercial building. 6 armed gunmen have taken an entire law firm on the 31st floor hostage. NYPD negotiators have been dealing with them for 3 hours with zero progress, so this is an incident where our superheroes can assist. She paused, sweeping her gaze across everyone at the long table. Homelander was leaning back in his chair, with Benjamin sitting right next to him. Maeve was present, along with A-Train, who was scheduled for a race this afternoon, and Starlight, clad in her original suit. The police have requested backup from the 7. According to the rotation schedule, this assignment should fall to. Madeline swiped her tablet. Homelander and Maeve. But she quickly continued, however, considering yesterday's press conference, Soldier Boy and Homelander share a father-son relationship. Yesterday, Soldier Boy's speech surpassed 400 million views across the web, and social media traction is still climbing wildly. If we deploy them as a father-son duo for this field mission, the public impact will far exceed the standard configuration. She shifted her gaze toward Benjamin, her standard corporate smile pulling back onto her face, though the grin was visibly forced. Of course, if Mr. Soldier Boy does not wish to participate in field missions, I completely understand. I'll go. Benjamin picked up his shield, his voice flat. Madeline's eyebrow hitched slightly. All her prepared arguments, about public image, Vought's strategic layout, and the status of lobbying for soups entering the military, were completely useless. Why was Soldier Boy being so cooperative today? Homelander turned to look at Benjamin, the light in his blue eyes brightening a degree. Really? Sitting around here is boring anyway. Benjamin stood up, hooking the shield onto his left arm, casting a sideways glance at Homelander. Let's go. Don't keep the cops waiting. The guns in their hands are real, this isn't a fucking script this time. Also, don't carry or hug me later. I don't want to look like a couple of fags. Homelander sprang up from his chair a beat faster than usual. It had been an exceptionally long time since he looked forward to a mission. Madeline watched the father-son duo stride out of the briefing room together, standing in silence for a brief moment. Wow, Homelander is eager, Maeve remarked. This looks like it's Soldier Boy's first actual field mission. By this time, Madison Avenue had been locked down for 3 full blocks. 3 layers of yellow police tape had been stretched across the perimeter, and the red and blue strobe lights of the police cruisers remained blinding even under the midday sun, forcing onlookers to squint. At least 20 police cars were parked haphazardly around the cordoned-off zone. The streets were packed with a sea of people, their arms holding up smartphones as dense as a moving forest. Just then, a red silhouette descended from the sky, his cape cutting a sharp arc against the New York skyline. The crowd's roar erupted instantly, but when the onlookers caught sight of another deep green silhouette beside him, the roar transformed into deafening cheers. Homelander landed securely inside the police tape, releasing his arm from Benjamin's waist. Benjamin scanned his surroundings. This was his first actual mission, mostly because it wasn't a scripted performance. It's Soldier Boy, it's really him. What he said at the press conference yesterday, I watched it. Too fucking cool. That face, I really want to sit on it. Screw off, like you're worthy. The 2 strongest soups came together. The original and the modern. Those gunmen are finished. The wave of crowd cheers surged relentlessly. A few bold bystanders broke past the first layer of police tape to press forward, only to be held back by officers. The reporters, cameras all pivoted away from the building toward the father and son, on-set directors screaming frantically into their earpieces, "Give me a close-up." Chapter 25, A Field Mission Together. A middle-aged police officer wearing a bulletproof vest quickly stepped forward to meet them. His eyes were bright, but his expression carried the sheer relief of seeing reinforcements rather than the typical fanaticism of a fan encountering superheroes. Homelander, draped in his cape, took a step forward and raised his hand to pat the officer's shoulder. The force wasn't heavy, but the veteran cop's shoulder didn't budge an inch under his palm. The man was steady. "Captain," Homelander's voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for the surrounding officers to hear, "You guys are the real heroes here. We're just here to play a supporting role. All right, where are the gunmen?" The officer was deeply flattered, a trace of excitement flashing through his eyes. This was a legendary superhero, after all, actually praising him as a hero. "Oh, for God's sake, please, stop giving him a look like you're trying to get laid, all right?" Benjamin remarked dryly from the side. Homelander froze for a moment. The police officer was also caught off guard, but he quickly recovered and said, "The gunmen are on the 31st floor. Our men have already locked down all the ground exits." Benjamin nodded, turning his head to look at Homelander. "Take me up, 31st floor." "Copy that." Homelander reached out and gripped Benjamin's waist, utilizing the exact same posture as when they arrived. Bending his knees slightly, he launched straight up into the air. A violent blast of wind exploded across the street. The hair of a few reporters who had huddled too close was instantly blown into a bird's nest, and a poorly secured police cap was whipped away, spinning 3 or 4 times in midair before its owner leapt up to snare it. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers once again, countless smartphones aiming simultaneously at the red and green trail ascending vertically against the building. The windows of the 31st floor were locked under Homelander's gaze the exact instant the two approached. Benjamin slammed the leading edge of his shield forward, shattering the window into a million pieces. The two dropped into the corridor one after the other, their combat boots making a sharp crunching sound as they stepped over the blanket of shattered glass shards. Homelander led the way while Benjamin followed slightly behind him to the side, keeping his shield held defensively in front of his chest. The door to the main office area was wide open. Two gunmen were inside. Their weapons configuration wasn't half bad. The leader was the first to turn his head, catching sight of the two figures at the doorway who absolutely shouldn't be there. Within a fraction of a second, his pupils shifted entirely from adrenaline-fueled anger to pure terror. Phew, he didn't even manage to finish the second syllable. Homelander had already materialized dead in front of him in an instant. Reaching out, he clamped a single hand around the barrel of the leader's rifle, crumpling the metal inside his palm like a piece of paper. Damn, that's fucking fast, Benjamin muttered to himself. He had literally just unlocked super speed LV1, yet he could barely track Homelander's silhouette. Then again, Homelander's super speed was probably around LV5, practically matching a train's pace. Homelander was secretly delighted, firmly believing that Benjamin's internal reaction was a compliment. Shoving his other hand against the leader's chest, he pushed him off the conference table, sending him crashing heavily to the floor. The leader struggled to push himself up. "If I were you, I'd just stay down, unless you want your head accidentally stepped on and popped like a watermelon," Benjamin threatened, raising his heavy boot over the man. The leader immediately closed his eyes and played dead. Right after that, Benjamin watched the second gunman get flattened by Homelander as well. Another instant translocation. That goddamn super speed again. Benjamin couldn't help but wonder if Homelander was deliberately trying to show off in front of him. His efficiency at taking down these low-level criminals was frankly ridiculous. Both gunmen were completely neutralized. They were still breathing, limbs intact, but entirely stripped of their ability to fight back, curling into tight heaps on the floor from the sheer pain. Homelander stood up and looked back at Benjamin, his blue eyes incredibly bright. Benjamin gave him a single, firm nod of approval. Catching the gesture, Homelander stood there, looking even happier. Hostages are safe, criminals are secure. Have the police SWAT team come up and take over, Benjamin said, pressing his communicator. When the two walked out of the building's main entrance, the cheers from both sides of the street practically tore the roof off Madison Avenue. The police officer hurried over to meet them, and Homelander stepped forward to pat his shoulder once more. "Hero, it's your turn to take the stage." Then Homelander grabbed Benjamin and launched them straight back into the sky. That afternoon, Vought Tower, Madeline Stillwell's private office. The tablet resting on the desk in front of her was looping footage from the mission site, the seamless father-son synergy during the breach, the highly efficient and bloodless containment, and the roaring cheers greeting them as they exited the building. She shut off the video, leaning back against her chair as she closed her eyes. Vought had secured everything it wanted from this mission, but the better they coordinated, and the more the public embraced this father-son duo, the fewer cards Vought would have left to play. "I have to find a way to control Homelander," Madeline thought to herself, but for the life of her, she couldn't come up with a viable solution right now. At this point, it was already a miracle that Homelander hadn't slaughtered her yet. Meanwhile, the footage of the father-son duo played on an endless loop across the internet, the view counts climbing relentlessly. Chapter 26. Bullying A-Train after his win. That afternoon, the annual race between A-Train and Shockwave went off exactly as scheduled at the Vought-branded Metropolitan Stadium. The oval track was paved with a specialized composite meant for high-performance supes, engineered to withstand the friction and blistering temperatures generated by bodies breaking the sound barrier. The stands were packed to maximum capacity, and the cheers from the crowd were completely deafening. Benjamin sat in a section reserved exclusively for Vought corporate executives. He was bored out of his mind, so he went down to scan the press corps area. He didn't see Huey anywhere. This deviated slightly from the narrative of the original show, a minor shift in the timeline. Granted, Huey had likely still ended up crossing paths with Butcher and his crew, otherwise, Translucent wouldn't have been snatched in the first place. As for the fan-signing booth, Starlight had changed back into her modest, decent suit, so there wasn't a single person making sleazy comments about her body. Furthermore, Starlight hadn't even become acquainted with Huey yet. After all, Huey's girlfriend was still drawing breath. These 3 minor details were just small incidents, but they were clear changes. Nevertheless, it was worth noting that a fair share of people approached Benjamin asking for autographs. A petty request like that wasn't something Benjamin would refuse. Especially the younger guys, looking at these impressionable kids instantly reminded Benjamin of Homelander. The starting gun cracked. A-Train launched forward like a blue bullet, with Shockwave hot on his heels. Soon enough, A-Train crossed the finish line with a half-body length advantage. The digits on the massive display froze. He had won. Benjamin stared expressionlessly at A-Train's time on the monitor. The metric was faster than A-Train's personal best, an incremental leap that was flatly impossible to achieve through standard training alone, even with a regular compound V enhancement. He had doped. He hadn't listened to a goddamn word he said. After the crowds cleared, night fell. A-Train was driving a black sports car, his brother sitting in the passenger seat. The brothers had just rounded the corner from the stadium's employee exit, heading out to celebrate. The euphoric high was still written across A-Train's face, but his fingers kept up a persistent tapping against the steering wheel. It wasn't a celebratory rhythm, it was an anxious tremor. He knew exactly what he had done. Before the race, he had secretly taken a shot of a concentrated compound V formula, a larger dose than last time, because his prior dosage was no longer enough to break past his plateau. The effects hadn't worn off entirely yet. He could hear his heart hammering inside his ribcage louder than the sports car's engine. The next instant, the car's headlights illuminated a figure standing perfectly upright on the pavement ahead. Deep green suit, eagle-head diamond shield, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Benjamin stood dead center in the middle of the road. His expression was obscured by the glare of the high beams, but A-Train didn't need to see his face. His foot slipped right off the accelerator, his entire right leg trembling violently. The sports car slowed to a halt. A-Train pushed the car door open, stood up, and took a step back. "Sir." His brother stepped out from the passenger side, a grin still plastered on his face. He hadn't noticed his brother's half-step retreat. "Soldier boy," his brother's tone was laced with excitement. "Hey, sir, did you come down here yourself to congratulate A-Train? This is huge. My brother completely smoked Shockwave, did you see that? He's so fucking A-Train." Benjamin's voice cut straight through the torrent of flattery. He didn't even look at the brother, his eyes pinned onto A-Train like a pair of iron rivets. A-Train took another step back. "You pussy who nearly killed a woman." Benjamin walked toward him slowly, his pace deliberate but radiating massive pressure. "It looks like you didn't take my words to heart at all. You doping piece of trash, relying on an exploit just to call yourself the fastest man on Earth. Oh, wait, you're actually the second fastest. Because without your goddamn drugs, you aren't anywhere near as fast as my son." He stopped directly in front of A-Train, less than a pace away. The shield hung motionlessly at his left side. "Garbage. The entity I despise most is a pussy who takes shortcuts." Saying this, Benjamin was inexplicably reminded of his original body's father. Back then, the old man had said something almost identical. The grin finally vanished from his brother's face. He snapped his head around to glare at A-Train. He had warned him countless goddamn times not to take the shot. Now Soldier Boy was standing right in front of them, and every single word coming out of his mouth verified his worst fears. "You," his brother parted his lips, wanting to say something to A-Train, or perhaps find a way to plead for mercy from Benjamin. But A-Train was already backing away, his knees knocking, his pupils darting frantically within his sockets. He wanted to run. As long as he got moving, nobody could catch him, barely anyone on Earth could match his pace. Soldier Boy couldn't fly, and his running speed was slow as hell. As long as he triggered his ability. If you take a single goddamn step, you're off the 7 for the rest of your life. A-Train's feet pinned themselves flat to the asphalt. His heart was hammering wildly against his chest. He understood the side effects of concentrated compound V better than anyone. Tachycardia was just the baseline, followed by arrhythmia, myocardial fibrosis, and eventually complete heart failure. And right now, pure terror was amplifying those side effects to the absolute limit. He could feel his heart rate climbing higher and higher. "Sir," his brother stepped in front of A-Train, holding his hands up at chest level with his palms facing outward, his voice entirely submissive. "I apologize on behalf of my brother. I'm truly sorry, it won't happen again. I guarantee it, I'll guarantee it for him. Truly. Get the fuck out of the way." Benjamin's gaze finally shifted to the brother. "Before I punch your goddamn head off. Don't touch my brother." A-Train lunged out from behind his brother, shielding him. His legs were still shaking and his heart was racing, but he still stepped up. Because this was his brother. Benjamin spared him a glance, said nothing, and threw a heavy punch. The fist connected squarely with the side of A-Train's face, the sheer force launching his entire body sideways. He bounced once off the pavement and rolled twice before coming to a stop. He lay sprawled in the dirt, his mouth full of blood, several teeth shattered, one of which rolled right up to his brother's shoe. His brother stared down at the bloody tooth, his legs going so weak he nearly dropped to his knees. "Jesus, God, how could you do that, you? Better to be beaten to death by me than to die agonizingly from a goddamn heart attack, isn't it? At least being killed by me carries a hell of a lot more honor," Benjamin barked coldly. "And judging by your dosage, you're cutting it close, A-Train. One of these days, you're going to clutch your chest and die a fucking miserable death. Even if you manage to survive by some miracle, you'll just be a useless cripple rotting in a hospital bed. And Shockwave, he'll become the fastest man alive, take your spot on the 7, and enjoy every single shred of glory you used to have. The whole world will praise Shockwave while spitting on your doping ass. Then Shockwave will bring your girlfriend right to your bedside just to gloat, and he'll kick you right off the mattress. You'll have to lie there with your eyes wide open, watching your woman and your rival together on your goddamn bed. Stop it, please, sir, I'm begging you, stop talking." A-Train curled into a ball on the road, clutching his chest, blood and tears mixing across his face. Suddenly, his heart began to hammer at a frequency he had never experienced before. Every individual thud sent an agonizing spasm through his chest. Then his eyes rolled back, his body gave a sharp convulsion, and he went completely still. His brother stood frozen in place, staring at his collapsed sibling, his lips trembling, his entire posture swaying as if his bones had been sucked clean out of him. Benjamin looked down at the unconscious A-Train, then snapped his gaze up to the brother. "What the fuck are you standing there for? Give your goddamn junk-headed brother CPR. Then call a fucking ambulance." His brother dropped to his knees instantly, locking his hands together over A-Train's chest to begin chest compressions. As he pumped, he dialed emergency services with a trembling hand. When the dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker, he suddenly realized something. The words Soldier Boy had spoken, all that brutal detail about Shockwave replacing his brother, the heart failure, the hospital bed, it hadn't been mindless abuse. He was laying out the exact endgame of the doping track ahead of time. He was showing his brother the absolute end of the line in the most violent way possible. He looked up at Benjamin. Maybe he had come down here to save A-Train's life. Chapter 27. Sorry, my pants ate your ice cream. Benjamin had just rounded the street corner and was about to pull out his phone to call Homelander. As he looked up, he saw a blond man in civilian clothes walking toward him from a short distance away. His pace was light, and his lips bore that signature smile. "How did you know I was here?" "I happened to be passing by," Homelander said, coming to a halt in front of him. He shoved his hands into his pants pockets and tilted his head. "What's for dinner?" Benjamin looked at him. "Let's get barbecue. That place on the corner, charcoal grilled." Homelander fell into step with him, the two walking side by side in the early autumn New York night wind. The streetlights stretched their shadows long behind them. Without the cape and with the shield left behind in the office, the two big men walking down the street in civilian clothes looked exactly like an ordinary father and son out for a meal after work. No one recognized them, or rather, even if someone did, they weren't entirely sure. After all, they were just passing by without taking a close look. The owner of the barbecue joint was an old Chinese man in his 60s. Watching the two massive guys squeeze into a cramped booth, he saw one order an entire rack of beef ribs, while the other ordered 3 portions of grilled chicken wings plus 2 skewers of grilled peppers. The charcoal smoke drifted over from the back kitchen, mixing with the fragrant aroma of cumin and rendered fat. The owner slammed 2 glasses of ice-cold beer onto the table, foam trickling down the sides. Suddenly, his pupils contracted. "Holy shit, you guys, are you Homelander and Soldier Boy?" Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "Can I get your autographs?" "Sure." It was a good thing the barbecue joint was mostly empty, otherwise, if anyone else had heard the owner's exclamation, a crowd would have swarmed them instantly. "Eat, don't be fucking polite with me." Benjamin picked up a rib and took a bite, grease dripping down the corner of his mouth. He wiped it casually with a napkin. Anyway, with our physiologies, it doesn't matter what kind of junk food we eat. If our cholesterol spikes, our livers will metabolize it ourselves. If cancer cells grow, our immune systems will choke them out on the spot. Being happy is the only thing that matters. Homelander picked up a skewer of chicken wings and took a bite, the crisp skin charred by the charcoal crackling faintly between his teeth. He chewed twice, then suddenly stopped, staring at the wing in his hand. What's wrong? Doesn't taste good. No. Homelander swallowed the chicken wing, his voice dropping half a notch. I was just thinking, if you hadn't been taken away, if I could have had this when I was a kid. Benjamin set down the rib in his hand, took a sip from his beer glass, and said nothing. It's no big deal. Homelander quickly twitched the corner of his mouth, as if trying to smooth things over for himself. Just a sudden thought. It's nothing, just curiosity. It really isn't a big deal, Benjamin said, placing his beer glass on the table, the base thudding against the wooden surface. It's not too late to make up for it now. We'll hit a hobby shop after dinner. A hobby shop? Model airplanes. Didn't you say last time that it's in the script you're shooting next week? Homelander set the chicken wing down. He picked up his beer glass, threw his head back, and took a massive gulp, his Adam's apple bobbing twice. When he set the glass down, beer foam was still clinging to the corner of his mouth, but his blue eyes were exceptionally bright in the dim light. 2 sets aren't enough, he said. Buy 4. Just in case we mess up assembling them, we'll have spares. You've got it all fucking planned out, haven't you? Anyway, your treat, those goddamn corporate fucks at Vought haven't paid me yet. As they were finishing up the barbecue, Homelander stood up. I'll go settle the tab. Go ahead, I'll get you back once I get paid. The two walked out of the barbecue joint, heading along the sidewalk toward the hobby shop. The New York night wind carried a damp chill blowing off the Hudson River, feeling quite comfortable against their faces. Someone was strumming a guitar outside a small roadside bar, a fragmented melody leaking through the half-open doorway, mingling with the clinking of glasses. Across the street, a little girl wearing a pink dress was running in their direction. She was about 5 or 6 years old, her blonde hair tied into 2 little pigtails, holding a double-scoop ice cream cone with 2 precariously balanced scoops of cream topping the tip of the waffle cone. She was running incredibly fast, her face wearing an expression that only a child eating their favorite treat could possibly have. A very cute little girl. Yay, my favorite double-scoop ice cream. Mia, slow down, don't trip, her mother chased after her, clutching shopping bags. The little girl wasn't looking where she was going. Children her age didn't have the slightest concept of watching the road. Holding up her ice cream, she dashed around the corner and slammed headlong into Homelander's leg. Splat! Both scoops of cream instantly lost the support of the cone and smeared solidly onto Homelander's pants. From his thigh down to his knee, the entire length of his trousers was streaked with a cascading white waterfall of cream. The waffle cone tumbled to the ground, crushed into fragments beneath the little girl's shoe. Mia looked down at her empty hands, then looked up at the tall, blond man standing before her. The corners of her mouth twitched twice, and she burst into a loud wail. My ice cream, oh my god, it's Homelander. Mia's mother caught up, the shopping bags in her hands, nearly dropping to the ground. Her face turned white as a sheet instantly. Her lips trembled. I'm so incredibly sorry, Mr. Homelander. My daughter is still so young, she didn't mean any harm, I'll pay for your pants, Homelander looked down at the puddle of cream dripping down his pants, remaining motionless. Staring at the little girl weeping uncontrollably before him, an image flashed through his mind. An image that didn't exist, because he had absolutely no memory of it. The scene could only be something he had conjured up in his imagination. A man wearing a deep green suit walking in front, with a little blonde boy holding an ice cream cone trailing closely behind him, taking tiny strides, trying his absolute hardest to match the rhythm of those massive boots ahead. He had never walked behind anyone holding an ice cream cone. But right now, this little girl could. Homelander knelt down. Bringing his eyes level with the little girl's, he extended his right hand, gently wiping away the tears on her face with his thumb. What a cute girl, Homelander murmured. The little girl looked up, a bit of snot still hanging from her lip, but her crying ceased as she realized the person in front of her was a superhero, the strongest superhero of all. Plenty of her classmates at school would mimic Homelander, putting on performances of taking flight. Sorry about that. Homelander's lips curved upward, a smile entirely free from any trace of PR training. My pants accidentally ate your ice cream. Here, go buy another one, get a few triple scoops. He pulled a $100 bill from his pocket, folded it, and tucked it into the little girl's chubby palm. Chapter 28, The Goddamn Plane Incident. The little girl looked down at the bill in her hand, then looked up at the blonde man before her. The tears in her eyes weren't even dry yet, but her mouth had already split into a wide, gap-toothed grin. Superhero, Mr. Homelander, thank you. I love you. Homelander reached out and pinched her other cheek. Alright, don't trip next time. If you wipe it onto this soldier boy's pants next to me, you might get chewed out. Benjamin's mouth twitched. Fuck you. The little girl turned and ran back to her mother's side, waving the $100 bill over her head as she shouted, Mommy. Mommy, the superhero father and son gave me money to buy a triple scoop ice cream. Mia's mother stood in place, looking at the puddle of cream still dripping down Homelander's pants, then looking at the $100 bill in her daughter's hand. Her lips moved slightly. Mr. Homelander is a truly good superhero, she muttered to herself. Mia tugged her mother's hand and looked up. Mommy, I want to buy a Homelander action figure. We'll buy it, we'll buy it. We'll buy the biggest one. Mia's mother knelt down, pulling a tissue from her bag to wipe the snot and tears from her daughter's face. Her voice still carried a residual trace of her previous panic, but her lips were already smiling. Let's buy a Soldier Boy 1 too, a father-son set, how about that? We'll buy the most expensive one. Thank you, Mommy, I love you too, my good daughter. The mother and daughter walked around the street corner hand in hand, the little girl's golden pigtails bobbing under the streetlights. Her laughter drifted back from far away, crisp like bells shaken by the evening wind. Benjamin stood a few paces away, taking everything in. He stepped forward and handed a tissue to Homelander. What the fuck did you mean by that just now? I wouldn't chew out a little girl that small. I saw you chewing out Starlight earlier. Homelander took the tissue, lowering his head to wipe the cream off his pants a couple of times. The more he wiped, the more smeared it got, so he finally just gave up. Fine. Benjamin shrugged his shoulders. He watched the receding backs of the mother and daughter vanish around the corner, falling silent for a moment. She has a nice smile. That little girl. Yeah, I used to find it annoying when I saw kids cry. Homelander crumpled the dirty tissue into a ball and threw it into a roadside trash can. That's what's called fucking growing up. Benjamin turned and strode toward the hobby shop. Let's go. Buy 4 sets. We'll have spares if we mess up the assembly. Homelander followed, his pace even lighter than before. The streetlights cast the shadows of the 2 large men onto the late-night New York sidewalk, one in front of the other, occasionally overlapping. Fuck you, Madeline, you goddamn bitch, you old whore. Fuck. Benjamin kicked open the door to Madeline's office with a thunderous crash, the door slab slamming against the wall. Madeline was sitting behind her desk holding a coffee cup, so startled by the sudden kick that half the coffee spilled onto the desk. She didn't even have time to wipe it. She stood up, her expression shifting from shock to confusion, and from confusion to utter bewilderment. Mr. Soldier Boy, what is the meaning of this? You still have the fucking nerve to ask me what I mean. Benjamin strode over to her desk, planting both hands on the surface and leaning forward. Why the fuck didn't you tell me that Homelander and Maeve went to rescue a hijacked plane? Madeline parted her lips. She looked down at the coffee stain spreading across the desk, then looked back up at Benjamin, her mind racing, yet completely unable to calculate what she had done wrong. There are only 3 hijackers on that plane. Homelander and Maeve are the 2 strongest soups on the 7. Sending the 2 of them to handle 3 hijackers, I don't see any prob. Of course you fucking don't. Benjamin slammed his hand onto the desk. The coffee cup jumped and completely overturned, the deep brown liquid flowing across the desktop and dripping onto the hem of Madeline's skirt. She didn't even dare to wipe it. You know they're 2 soups. You know they're the 2 strongest on the 7. Did you ever consider that with my dumbass son's personality, cutting loose inside a cramped airplane is highly likely to get everyone on that plane killed? Madeline froze. The expression on her face shifted from confusion to a total blank. She genuinely began to process this possibility in her mind, and realized that she had never once considered it. Then, what do we do? Madeline asked. She had a thought. If it really came to that, she only hoped Homelander wouldn't leave any. So hand over the goddamn location right fucking now. Benjamin straightened up, rapping his knuckles hard against her desk twice. The real-time location of that plane over the Atlantic. Now, hurry up. Madeline frantically opened her tablet. She swiped it with her finger, scrolling quickly. A small red dot popped up on the map, moving slowly along an arc. Right here, latitude 38 degrees north, longitude 71 degrees west, altitude 38,000 feet. The position is constantly updating. Benjamin glanced at the coordinates and turned to walk out. Reaching the door, he stopped and threw a backward glance over his shoulder. Get on the phone with the Deep immediately. The Deep, Madeline's voice carried a trace of uncertainty. He's no longer a member of the Seven. Forget it, I'll contact him myself. Without looking back, Benjamin slammed the door and left. In the corridor, Benjamin pulled out his phone as he walked and dialed the Deep's number. The phone rang several times before it was picked up, the Deep's cautious voice coming through the line. Sir, I've already been fired. I don't think I've done anything wrong lately. Shut up and listen to me. Benjamin kept his voice low, his words rapid. Get your ass over to the Atlantic right now. Coordinate 38 north, 71 west. There's a hijacked plane. Homelander and Maeve are on it. Homelander, he can handle it himself. He can't handle it, he might break the fucking plane. You wait down below. If something goes wrong with the plane, you're responsible for saving people. There are over 100 lives on that flight. If shit hits the fan, Homelander can bring the people down to you, so he won't have to carry them all the way to the coast. Don't you fucking love the ocean? Don't you love fucking dolphins? Deploying those goddamn dolphins to rescue people from the Atlantic is right up your alley. If you pull this off well, I might just let you back onto the Seven. The Deep fell silent on the other end for 2 seconds. Then his voice shifted, carrying a layer of solemnity it had never possessed before. Understood, Mr. Soldier Boy. I'll head over right away and make sure it's handled, assuming Homelander is willing to bring them down to me. Benjamin hung up, feeling a bit agitated. He had no idea what would happen by the time he arrived. Had Homelander already fried the plane's controls? Had he already chosen to abandon everyone? Had he already decided to bury the truth for the sake of his approval ratings? Just yesterday, he had said, that's what's called fucking growing up. If Homelander pulled this stunt on him today, that so-called growing up would look like a total fucking joke. Benjamin immediately sent the Deep a shared link for real-time coordinate tracking. Chapter 29. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? 38,000 feet above the Atlantic. A passenger jet was flying smoothly above the clouds. Inside the cabin, 123 passengers and 6 crew members were enduring the longest 40 minutes of their lives. The plane had been hijacked 20 minutes after takeoff when 3 hijackers brandished their weapons. Then, the cabin door was violently torn open. Air rushed inside, oxygen masks dropping in unison. Before the passengers, screams could even escape their throats. A figure clad in a blue suit and a red cape landed firmly right in the center of the cabin aisle. His cape billowed backward in the violent fluctuations of cabin pressure, his blue eyes gleaming in the dim cabin light like 2 burning shell casings. Behind him, Maeve landed, her combat boots hitting the cabin floor, her knees bending slightly to absorb the impact. The first criminal was sucked out of the cabin door by the pressure differential before he could even react. The second turned to shoot, but Maeve's palm had already clamped around the back of his neck. With a swift twist of her wrist and a sharp crack, his limp body collapsed into the aisle. As for the third criminal, Homelander's heat vision had already burned straight through his chest cavity. The 3 hijackers were dealt with. Homelander flicked his wrist, walked over to the cabin door, grabbed the door slab with both hands, and forcefully pulled it shut. The pressure differential vanished, and the screams gradually subsided. He turned around to face the cabin full of terrified passengers, spreading his arms as his lips curled into a standard, 8-toothed smile. The crisis is over. You're safe. Deafening cheers erupted throughout the cabin. Some wept with their heads in their hands, some slumped in their seats gasping for air, while others shouted, "Long live Homelander!" And, "I love you, Homelander!" Standing in the center of the aisle, Homelander bathed in the applause and praise pouring in from all directions. The upward curve of his mouth flexed higher than usual. Good. When he went back tonight, Benjamin would definitely be even prouder of him. He was constantly getting reamed as a pussy, but today he had pulled off a flawless operation over the Atlantic. 3 lives, no, 3 criminals, completely neutralized, and the hostages completely unharmed. What else could his father possibly say? This was what fucking growing up looked like. Let's check the cockpit, he told Maeve. The 2 pushed open the cockpit door. To their surprise, the pilot was still being held hostage by a 4th criminal. Just like in the original show, Homelander shot the criminal, inadvertently destroying the plane's control console with his heat vision. The indicator lights for all the buttons on the console flickered simultaneously, then half of them went dark. The altitude readings on the instrument panel skipped twice and began to drop. "What did you do?" Maeve's voice instantly tightened. "I don't know, fuck." Homelander stared at the panel sliced clean in half by his heat vision, stabbing at the buttons with his fingers. No response. He stabbed them a few more times, still nothing. The plane gave a violent shudder. Screams erupted anew from the cabin. Grabbing the door frame to steady herself, Maeve looked at Homelander. "Is the console broken?" Homelander didn't answer. He stood there, staring at the control panel, the confidence in his blue eyes deflating rapidly like a punctured balloon. "Ruined." The word exploded in his brain, burning hotter than the heat vision that had just pierced the criminal's chest cavity. He had botched it. Just a moment ago, he wanted to make his father proud of him, and now he had entirely ruined the whole plane. The image of Benjamin shaking his head in disappointment surfaced once more, and he could almost hear his father's voice, "Look at yourself. An absolute fucking pussy. Lift the plane up." Maeve's voice dragged him back to reality. "Lift the plane? How?" Homelander turned around, the agitation in his voice bleeding through. "There's nothing to push against. We're in midair. Where do I put my hands? If I use leverage, I'll just tear right through it. Even if I try to lift the plane, my entire body will rip straight through the fuselage." Maeve fell silent for a moment. "What if you fly out front and intercept it, ram it level?" "Ram it? At my speed, if I smash into it, the plane will either flip over or get punctured clean through." Mulling it over, Maeve realized it was indeed impossible. She looked out the cabin window at the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, her mind frantically sorting through various plans. The descent, which had already begun, was becoming increasingly obvious, the fuselage tilting downward at an irreversible angle. "Then we carry them down one by one," Maeve said. "Take the passengers down to the ground one at a time. Fly them to the coast. Or to an island below. 123 round trips." Homelander glanced back at the sea of heads filling the cabin, then out the window at the boundless Atlantic. "We're in the middle of the Atlantic. Then what do you suggest we do?" Maeve's voice rose as well. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know." Homelander roared, his knuckles cracking as he clenched his fists. He was Homelander, the most powerful soup on Earth. He had super speed, super strength, heat vision, flight, he could do anything. Yet faced with a plunging plane in a cabin full of ordinary people, every single one of those abilities was completely fucking useless. "Listen," Maeve lowered her voice, leaning in close to him. "If Soldier Boy finds out about this..." Homelander's expression turned exceptionally ugly in that instant. "He'll know I botched it. No, just yesterday, he and I built those model airplanes together." Homelander's voice suddenly quieted down, as if murmuring to himself. "He'll find out. He knows everything." The passengers in the cabin began screaming again. Women and children were weeping, men were slamming their fists against the armrests, and an elderly woman started reciting the Bible. Homelander marched back down the aisle. He needed to placate the passengers. Whatever happened, he had to keep the crowd under control first. He reached the midpoint of the passenger cabin, and just as he was about to raise his hands to signal for silence, a familiar little girl's voice drifted up from below. "Mr. Homelander, you're going to save us, right?" Homelander's steps pinned dead in place. Mia was sitting in a window seat. 2 golden pigtails, a gap-toothed smile, a pink dress. The exact little girl who had smeared her double scoop ice cream all over his pants at a New York street corner yesterday. She had said, "Superhero, thank you, I love you." Her mother had later bought her a triple scoop ice cream, along with the Homelander and Soldier Boy Fatherson action figure set. Right now, those eyes were looking up at him, not with fear, but with absolute trust. When he first boarded, he hadn't even noticed her. "Oh my God," he knelt down. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Beside Mia, her mother was holding her tightly. The mother's eyes were red and swollen, clearly from crying just moments ago, but the instant she saw Homelander kneel down, her lips trembled as she forced a smile. We're going on vacation." Homelander reached out and pulled Mia into his arms. The little girl wrapped her arms securely around his neck, her cheek pressing against his shoulder guard, her cold little hands clutching the fabric of his suit's back. He glanced back at Maeve. Leaning against the cockpit door frame, Maeve took in the scene, her lips tightly pressed together. Chapter 30. There is no God in this world. Homelander held Mia, the little girl's arms wrapped around his neck, her cheek pressed against his shoulder guard. Her body heat radiated through his suit, warm. Homelander suddenly realized one thing. He seemingly had absolutely no way to save this entire plane of people. No matter how fast he flew, there wasn't enough time to ferry them down trip by trip. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't lift a passenger jet with no point of leverage, and he couldn't fix a plane. Even though he was the most powerful soup on Earth, standing here holding a little girl who had smeared ice cream all over his pants yesterday, he could do absolutely nothing. Homelander's breathing grew heavy as he began to gasp for air, his chest tightening as if something were pressing down on it. Mia shifted in his arms, softly calling out, "Mr. Homelander," but he didn't respond. His blue eyes stared blankly into space. Maeve stood at the cockpit door, watching Homelander hyperventilate while holding Mia. Her lips moved, wanting to say something, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. She had almost never seen him completely breathless. His phone rang. It was Homelander's private number. He pulled the device from the inner lining of his suit, a contact flashing on the screen, "Father." He gently placed Mia down on her seat, stood up, walked to the rear of the cabin, and pressed answer. "How's the mission coming along?" Benjamin's voice came through. Homelander gripped the phone. He parted his lips, desperately wanting to say that he was fine, the mission was accomplished, and everything was going smoothly. But he couldn't do it. He didn't want to embarrass himself in front of his father. The plane is malfunctioning." His voice wasn't loud, but everyone in the cabin heard it. After a brief silence, panic exploded like a bomb inside the cabin. Men were shouting, women were weeping, and the flight attendants, pale-faced, tried to maintain order, but no one listened. Someone curled up in their seat clutching their head, screaming, "I knew it." Benjamin's voice wasn't disrupted by the noise, remaining steady, though his pace was a few beats faster. "Oh, fuck. Listen, Homelander, I already prepared for this. It's not that I didn't trust you, it's just that I figured putting a powerhouse like you inside a fragile plane was highly likely to end in disaster, and what do you know? There's still time for everything, so keep your shit together. When you and Maeve left, I already coordinated with the Deep. The Deep has deployed a pod of dolphins waiting right along the plane's flight path. No matter how fast the plane is moving, those goddamn dolphins are waiting ahead. You drop the passengers down one by one right now. Actually, take them two at a time, it's more efficient. You don't need to carry them to the shore, just drop them onto the surface of the sea. Those dolphin bastards will ferry them to the beach. Did you hear me clearly?" Homelander gripped the phone, saying nothing. His breathing hadn't completely stabilized yet, but the panic in his pupils began to recede. "The Deep, that useless piece of shit." Maeve was somewhat curious, her voice drifting over from the side. She had overheard the conversation over the phone. "Did you hear me clearly?" Benjamin asked once more. "I got it," Homelander said. Then he hung up the phone, turning to face the cabin full of panicking passengers. Shoving the phone back into the inner lining of his suit, he took a deep breath. "Everyone," his voice grew clear again. "There's been a slight mishap. The plane was indeed broken by those criminals, but don't worry, I am Homelander. Every single one of you will be safely delivered to the surface of the ocean. The Deep has already deployed a massive number of dolphins waiting down there, and the dolphins will ferry you to the shore. Do you understand? What about our luggage? God damn it, you moron, fuck. You're thinking about luggage right now." A middle-aged man roared back at the person who asked. "We'll be lucky to make it out alive, fuck." Homelander turned to Maeve. "You stay on the plane and maintain order. I'll drop them off. Open and shut the door carefully every single time, don't let the slipstream suck the rest of them out." Maeve gave a nod, staring at this somewhat unfamiliar Homelander. If it were the old Homelander, he would have absolutely chosen to abandon this plane without a second thought. She walked over to the cabin door, reaching out to grip the handle. Homelander stepped up to Mia and her mother, bending down to scoop Mia up with one arm while wrapping his other arm around the mother's shoulders. "Close your eyes," he said gently. The mother and daughter closed their eyes simultaneously. Maeve yanked the door open, the wind howling as it rushed inside, and Homelander launched himself out, his red cape cutting a straight trajectory through the sky. He decelerated just above the ocean, the sea breeze carrying a briny, salty mist right into his face. Looking down, a long line of gray dorsal fins cut through the water. At least dozens of dolphins were floating silently in a precise formation, lined up like soldiers waiting for inspection. Sitting on the back of the leading dolphin was a single figure, the Deep. He wore his blue and green suit, and sitting behind him was a Secantire speedster soup whose speed wasn't anywhere near a train's or shockwaves but was more than enough for a rescue operation like this. Otherwise, the Deep's speed would be completely insufficient. Moreover, he had already mobilized a massive number of dolphins in the vicinity by the time Homelander and Maeve arrived. Not bad, Deep. Homelander descended to the surface of the sea, his combat boots planting on the water as steadily as if he were stepping on concrete. You actually have a goddamn brain. Mr. Homelander, it's the least I could do, the Deep said sycophantically. Homelander gently placed the mother and daughter onto the back of the leading dolphin. Mia opened her eyes, looking down at the smooth gray skin beneath her and the tiny eyes blinking up at her, her mouth forming a wide, surprised, "Oh. Mommy, a dolphin, a real dolphin." "Yes, baby, the superhero Deep came to save us too. When we go back, I want to buy a Deep action figure. We'll buy it, we'll buy the most expensive one, baby, thank God." "Mommy, it's not God. There is no God in this world. It's the superhero Homelander, the superhero Deep, Soldier Boy, and Maeve who saved us." Homelander glanced at Mia. Then, he continued, "Once the rescue is successful, I will suggest to Soldier Boy that you return to the Seven." Having spat out his piece to the Deep, Homelander didn't waste any more words and launched back into the air. 1 trip, 2 trips, 3 trips. Homelander streaked like a red meteor, shuttling back and forth between the 38,000 feet altitude and the surging waves of the Atlantic. Taking 2 people each time, he completed the entry and exit within 3 seconds of Maeve yanking open the door. Maeve stood by the cabin door counting the numbers, open, shut, open, shut. One after another, the passengers were delivered to the surface of the sea, caught by the pod of dolphins, and then swiftly guided toward the coast by the Deep at the crest of the waves. By the 60th trip, everyone had been cleared. Scooping up the final passenger along with Maeve, he flew away from the plunging airplane. Chapter 31. Don't disparage my hero. Before long, the setting sun had dyed the Atlantic into a sheet of dark gold. On the sea, over 100 dolphins formed a spectacular phalanx, each carrying 1 or 2 soaking wet but living humans on their backs as they made a grand procession toward the east coast. That Secantire speedster soup and the Deep led the way at the front of the phalanx, constantly adjusting their speed on the crests of the waves to ensure no dolphin fell behind. On a beach somewhere on the east coast, reporters had long since received the news, their camera lenses lining the entire coastline. Live broadcast helicopters circled in the sky, and CNN's breaking news banner scrolled across screens. Homelander, Maeve, the Deep, and Soldier Boy successfully rescue all 123 passengers of downed airliner, 0 casualties. On the beach, passengers wrapped in blankets sat inside temporarily erected rescue tents. Some wept while clutching hot coffee, while others recounted their experience to the cameras in terms so exaggerated it sounded like they were recapping a Hollywood blockbuster. Mia was bouncing up and down on the sand. This was the most thrilling moment of her life, free-falling from the sky and riding dolphins. She could totally brag about this experience to her classmates. Homelander stood at the very front of the beach, his hair blown into a total mess by the sea breeze, but he was smiling. Maeve stood to his left, pulling a strand of seaweed tangled in her hair and tossing it onto the ground. The Deep stood a bit further away, leaning against a massive dolphin that was nudging his shoulder with its snout. He reached out and patted its smooth forehead. Across the beach, the sea breeze carrying a briny mist blew off the Atlantic, tangling the reporters' hair and microphone cords. The thrum of the live broadcast helicopter's rotors roared overhead. Benjamin walked out from the crowd. He had also been brought over by a Secantire speedster soup. That guy's speed naturally didn't compare to a train's, or even the other speedster leading the dolphins, but carrying a massive guy in a deep green suit down here within 2 hours was well within his capabilities. Benjamin's own speed was still lacking. According to his analysis, Homelander and A-Train should both have super speed LV5, Shockwave was LV4 close to LV5, and these 2 Secantire soups were likely LV3. Homelander was standing at the front of the beach fielding relentless questions from several reporters. Catching a glimpse of the deep green silhouette out of the corner of his eye, he instantly turned his head and raised his arm to give a vigorous wave. Benjamin walked up to him, sizing him up from head to toe. "Good job. Just be a hell of a lot more careful next time, alright? This whole incident could have been handled cleanly from the start." Homelander nodded, his lips moving. The hijackers just The hijackers destroyed the cockpit controls, sir, Maeve said calmly, stepping up beside them. Soldier Boy knew damn well it wasn't the hijackers, but since they were live on air, they had to let the hijackers take the fall. Benjamin glanced at Maeve, then back at Homelander. Forget it, just be extra careful next time. Right, I will, Homelander nodded. The reporters had already swarmed them. Their camera lenses gleamed under the setting sun as a dozen microphones thrust toward Homelander simultaneously, questions buzzing at him like a hornet's nest that had been kicked. Homelander cleared his throat, squared his shoulders, and plastered that standard corporate smile back onto his face. Benjamin stood right by Homelander's side. Mr. Homelander, why did the plane's control console malfunction? It was the hijackers. Homelander's tone was steady and certain. During the crossfire with the hijackers, they destroyed the cockpit console. It was an unforeseen accident. Upon realizing the plane was out of control, I immediately contacted my father, Soldier Boy. He advised me to carry the passengers down in pairs while coordinating with the Deep to lead a pod of dolphins to intercept us on the ocean surface. Throughout the entire rescue operation, the Deep and his marine mammal team played a pivotal role. A male reporter wearing glasses thrust his microphone forward a few more inches. Something doesn't add up. How did Soldier Boy know to deploy the Deep ahead of time? Based on the timeline, the Deep set out even before the cockpit console was destroyed. Does this mean you knew beforehand that the plane would encounter trouble? Was this entire incident a meticulously engineered publicity stunt? Homelander's smile froze. The corner of his mouth twitched. He had saved 123 people, flying back and forth trip after trip, the sea breeze caking his suit with salt, his back still damp even now. He had carried Mia all the way from 38,000 feet down to the back of a dolphin without losing a single strand of her golden pigtails. And now this reporter was asking him if it was a publicity stunt. A deep fury surfaced in Homelander's blue eyes. He glared dead at the reporter with the glasses, his pupils contracting slightly, his fingers curling unconsciously at his side. He could burn a coin-sized hole right through this man's skull in less than a tenth of a second with his heat vision. For some reason, the reporter with the glasses felt a sudden chill run down his spine. But soon, Homelander forced a shred of composure. No, that's not true. It's just that Soldier Boy is exceptionally brilliant. He anticipated that unexpected complications might arise, so he had the Deep move out ahead of time. After all, I am the most powerful. Still, it doesn't make sense, another reporter chimed in, cutting Homelander off. It was a female reporter wearing a gray trench coat, her tone even sharper than the guy with glasses. Soldier Boy deploys the Deep in advance, and then the cockpit console conveniently gets destroyed, right above a pod of dolphins waiting directly beneath the plane's flight path. It's all too coincidental. Can you explain why rescue assets were already in position before the accident even occurred? Veins bulged on Homelander's forehead. And what about compensation for the passengers? A third reporter shoved his way forward. They lost all their luggage. Someone lost a laptop. Someone lost crucial documents. Someone. Benjamin's eyes flickered. Something was off with these reporters. Were they not Vought's reporters? Or was someone targeting Vought? Butcher's crew didn't have this kind of leverage right now. These reporters were definitely Vought assets. Meaning, they weren't targeting Vought as a whole. They were targeting Homelander. Even though Homelander had indeed breached the cabin, he had genuinely saved everyone, which was a hell of a lot better than what happened in the original timeline. Besides, Vought International would compensate them for their losses anyway. For these reporters to be this aggressively confrontational, they were absolutely gunning for Homelander, maybe even targeting him as well. Enough. Benjamin's voice wasn't loud, but he took a step forward, shielding Homelander behind him, his gaze sweeping across the reporters still trying to crowd them. Locked under his glare, the male reporter with the glasses instinctively pulled his microphone back half an inch. Listen up. Benjamin's voice was coarse. Homelander could have easily abandoned every single one of them and flown off with Maeve. That would have been the easiest path for him. Everyone on that goddamn plane dies, nobody left alive to tell the tale. Homelander could have completely washed his hands of the whole thing. He took a step forward. The reporter with the glasses took a step back. But he didn't. The criminals destroyed the plane, and he saved every single soul who should have died up there. 123 people, not a single one missing. And now you're standing here, hounding the man who just saved over 100 of your fellow citizens, asking him if it's a fucking publicity stunt. He took another step forward. The female reporter backed away too. Keep talking that goddamn shit, and I'll rip your fucking heads off right now and dump them in the ocean. Fuck you. The beach fell dead silent for 3 full seconds. There was nothing but the sound of the crashing waves and the distant thrum of the helicopter rotors. The lips of the reporter with the glasses trembled, his microphone slipping from his hand and hitting the sand with a dull thud. The female reporter lowered her head, shoving her voice recorder into her pocket, not daring to look up again. The rest of the reporters collectively took half a step back, not a single soul dared to test him. They were used to superheroes smiling, waving on camera, and saying, "It's what we do." They weren't used to a veteran in a deep green suit standing before them and threatening to rip their heads off and toss them into the sea. And the look on his face left absolutely zero doubt in anyone's mind. He wasn't just throwing out empty threats, he genuinely meant it. Homelander stood behind Benjamin, staring at his father's broad back shielding him. The badgering from those reporters was still buzzing in his ears. Although the violent urges within him hadn't completely faded, he just stood there, watching his father tear into them on his behalf. Looking down at his footprints in the sand, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly before he lifted his head and stood tall once more. Maeve stepped in to smooth things over. "All right, look, we would never waste this kind of operational overhead to engineer a publicity stunt out of a standard hijacking, okay? As for the destroyed console, a catastrophic failure like that is the last thing we want to see, but it happened. Vought International will fully compensate every passenger for any property loss sustained. There's zero incentive for us to throw that kind of money away on a stunt that achieves absolutely nothing. Sir, ma'am, Homelander is a hero. He saved me, he saved my mommy, he saved everyone. If it weren't for them, we would have died because of the bad guys. Stop talking bad about my hero." Mia ran over, her childish voice ringing out clearly. Chapter 32, Vought's Counterattack. The video of the beach interview blew up that very night. Homelander standing before the microphone saying, "The hijackers destroyed the cockpit console," the reporter pressing with, "Is this a meticulously engineered publicity stunt?" followed by Soldier Boy's line, "Keep talking that goddamn shit, and I'll rip your fucking heads off right now and dump them in the ocean." The clip was chopped into countless versions, spreading like wildfire across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. 6 out of the top 10 trending topics were related to the incident. Public opinion was currently split into 2 factions. One side believed it absolutely wasn't a stunt. Soldier Boy was right. Homelander could have easily ignored those 100+ people, but he saved them, not a single one missing, and handled the arrangements perfectly. Vought was even providing compensation. Everything was fine. Soldier Boy's tirade against the reporters was coarse and volatile, violating every single public relations guideline. Yet it was precisely this raw authenticity that countless fans found incredibly satisfying. However, the other side was much louder. They believed all the suspicious details pointed to one single fact: Soldier Boy deploying the deep ahead of time proved they knew the plane would encounter trouble long before it happened. If it weren't a publicity stunt, it would be flatly impossible to anticipate the issue. Having 123 people walk right up to death's door only to be forced to show immense gratitude to their saviors was, in itself, a form of manipulated terror. This faction relentlessly blasted Homelander and Maeve on social media. Homelander and Maeve's approval ratings began to plummet. Even the Deep was completely dumbfounded. He was supposed to be returning to the 7, yet his already abysmal approval ratings had dropped even further. Benjamin's approval rating remained practically unshifting. His remarks to the reporters made one segment of the public view him as authentic, while another saw him as vulgar. The 2 factions were roughly equal in number, neutralizing each other out. But there was one thing everyone agreed on: you couldn't do a damn thing about Soldier Boy. He refused to play the PR game, wouldn't cooperate with media manipulation, and didn't care what anyone said about him. He had no exploitable weakness because he simply didn't give a shit how anyone perceived him. At 2 a.m., tragic news broke. 2 of the rescued passengers, an elderly couple in their 70s, had been rushed to the hospital for examination that evening, only to suffer sudden cardiac arrest at different times. Resuscitation efforts failed, and both passed away. The doctor's preliminary diagnosis was an overloaded heart caused by extreme terror during the high-altitude descent. This news acted like a depth charge dropped into an already churning ocean of public opinion. Every media outlet that had been holding back caught fire instantly. CNN's late-night news anchor delivered the opening line that would later be quoted repeatedly in a solemn tone: 123 rescued, 2 dead. Is this the price of heroism, or the casualties of a publicity stunt? On social media, the voices of condemnation completely overwhelmed any defense. Someone dug up a photo of Mia, the little girl who had wrapped her arms around Homelander's neck on the plane. They photoshopped her face into black and white, captioning it, "What if this publicity stunt had caused her death instead?" By 3 a.m., the post had been shared 20,000 times, the comment section dissolving into a sea of tears. The deaths of the two elderly passengers transformed the prior skepticism of a publicity stunt from a conspiracy theory into ironclad proof. If a mission wasn't a stunt, why deploy rescue forces in advance? If it wasn't a stunt, why did people still die even when rescue forces were in position? Homelander's approval rating data updated at 3:17 a.m. A drop of 6 percentage points. The PR intern working the night shift thought the system had glitched when he saw the number, refreshing it 3 times only to get the exact same result every time. Homelander sat on the floor of his apartment, his back resting against the base of the sofa, his phone clutched in his hand. The data curve of his approval rating was displayed on the screen. The red line, plummeting off a cliff, stabbed straight downward like a wound burned clean through by heat vision. He had been staring at that curve for 20 full minutes. To save those people, Homelander had shuttled back and forth between the high altitude and the ocean surface 60 goddamn times. He had held Mia in his arms, placed her mother onto the back of a dolphin, and then 2 elderly people died. It wasn't his fault. The doctors said it was an overloaded heart. But everyone was saying, if Homelander hadn't staged a publicity stunt, if he hadn't blown the whole thing out of proportion, if he had notified the passengers in advance, those 2 elderly people wouldn't have spent those agonizing 2 hours in sheer terror, wouldn't have suffered cardiac arrest, wouldn't have died. Homelander parted his lips, murmuring to himself, "I did my best." He spoke to the empty air. Then Homelander buried his face in his knees, his back resting against the base of the sofa, his cape pinned beneath his body and crumpled into a mess. His phone screen dimmed, and the plummeting red line faded into darkness, along with all the words of condemnation. Homelander felt himself starting to suffocate. He even wondered if it would have been better if he had just abandoned all of them in the first place. Benjamin hadn't slept, because the trajectory of public opinion was clearly wrong. The sudden deaths of the elderly passengers was a tragedy, but the media had pinned both lives entirely on the publicity stunt narrative, focusing all their firepower square on Homelander. The narrative framework of this incident was too neat to be organic public reaction. Someone was pushing this from behind. Vought explicitly needed to get soups into the military and explicitly needed the public to maintain a positive impression of superheroes, yet at a time like this, they were permitting or even driving a media assassination campaign targeting Homelander. They would rather let the company's short-term interests take a hit just to screw over Homelander and himself. No, the main goal was still to go after him, to drive a wedge between him and Homelander, purely to make Homelander suffer, because if it weren't for him, Homelander wouldn't have dropped so much in approval ratings. Interesting. Willing to self-mutilate. Why? Is it because I'm too much of a fucking threat? Benjamin snorted coldly. Outside the window, the New York night sky was dyed a murky orangered by countless lights, the Vought logo atop Vought Tower still burning tirelessly. Soon, he dialed Homelander's number. Chapter 33. That's my family. At 2 in the morning, the corridors of Vought Tower were completely silent. Madeline stood outside the door to Homelander's apartment, clutching a manila envelope in her hands so tightly that her knuckles were white. Before coming, she had injected herself with a heart stabilizer. The stuff kept a person's heart rate steady even when emotions were running high. Though it was bad for her health, Madeline had no choice this time. She had completely lost Homelander's trust. Madeline knocked on the door. Hearing no response, she used her own key to let herself in. Homelander was sitting on the floor, his back resting against the base of the sofa. His cape was crumpled into a chaotic heap beneath him. He lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot. "Get out." Madeline didn't back down. She quietly closed the door behind her, her voice incredibly soft. "My baby, I know you're hurting. I came to check on you. I told you." Now, immediately, Homelander bolted up from the floor, his eyes flaring red as a dangerous glow ignited around his pupils. "Get the fuck out." Madeline felt a prickle of dread crawl up her spine, but she didn't leave. She couldn't. If she walked out now, Vought's self-destructive PR war would be all for nothing. To drive a wedge between the father and son, Vought hadn't hesitated to stab itself in the gut. They would rather stall the bill to get Soups into the military and take a massive hit to their short-term profits just to drive a stake between Homelander and Soldier Boy. And tonight, she was the one holding the mallet. Homelander, have you ever considered something? Homelander stared dead at her, remaining silent. If it weren't for Soldier Boy, your approval ratings wouldn't have taken a nosedive like this. Tonight, you wouldn't have so many people turning their backs on you, withdrawing their love. Homelander's eyelashes flickered slightly. The red glow in his eyes didn't dissipate, but he didn't unleash it. Think about it. Madeline took a step closer. Soldier Boy's approval ratings have stayed sky-high. No matter how vicious the media storm gets, his numbers don't budge an inch. But what about you? You saved people. You saved every single one of them. You flew back and forth trip after trip, carrying that little girl in your arms to place her safely on a dolphin's back, and your approval rating drops 6 percentage points. Every bit of this is on him. The entire reason he came back was to replace you. He wants to be the most popular Soup on Earth. Think about it, if he weren't here and the plane crashed, you could have just walked away from those 100-odd lives, and nobody would have ever known the truth. Would your approval ratings have dropped then? Homelander fell silent for a long moment before speaking up. What the fuck are you trying to say? Soldier Boy is my father. He wouldn't screw me over. Madeline held up the manila envelope. Her fingers lingered over the seal for a fraction of a second before she tore it open, pulling out several yellowed pages. Under the dim lighting, the paper had turned a brittle, aged tan with curled edges, packed with text printed in an old typewriter font. He's not your father, baby. He's just a guy who happens to share your DNA. That's all it is. He didn't raise you for a single day, he never changed a single diaper, and he never sat by your bedside when you had nightmares. You and him, you're just strangers. Strangers tied together by blood. She paused, turning the pages around so Homelander could see the vivid red, classified, stamp slammed across the top. Besides, a literal traitor, how much do you think he actually gives a shit about over 100 innocent lives? Didn't you always want to see his real file? It's right here. I didn't want to give it to you back then because I was terrified you wouldn't be able to handle it. Soldier Boy, your father, is a traitor. He defected to the Soviet Union and betrayed America. His entire plan from the very beginning was to come back and destroy you. To drag down your approval ratings, strip away the public's love, and take your place. That is what Soldier Boy is after. Homelander looked down at the pages. The dense blocks of text cast tiny shadows under the lamplight. It looked incredibly authentic. Madeline, he said softly, his voice suddenly dropping to a near whisper. Yes, so none of this was actually a stunt, right? He lifted his head, his blue eyes locking straight onto hers. It's just because I followed Soldier Boy's orders. That's why the public thought it was a setup. Exactly, Madeline said, a subtle hint of desperation creeping into her voice. But Soldier Boy genuinely. Did Vought have a hand in this? Homelander cut her off. The corners of his mouth slowly peeled back into a smile. Like, manipulating the PR to intentionally smear me. Madeline could feel the heart stabilizer wearing off. A wave of raw panic caused her heart rate to quicken. Thanks to the drug, the spike was incredibly faint, but it was undeniably there. Still, she believed he wouldn't be able to notice. The expression on her face didn't crack, her gentle, soothing smile remaining perfectly in place. Of course, baby, why would Vought ever hurt you? You're the most important asset this company has. Homelander chuckled. Madeline, he said in a silky tone, did you know that whenever you lie, the outer corner of your left eye twitches? Once, sometimes twice. Madeline parted her lips, her heart pounding violently now. In truth, Homelander didn't actually know any such physical tell. But tracking those two subtle fluctuations in her heartbeat was more than enough to give away the entire game. Sizzle. 2 beams of blinding red light pierced straight through her eyes. 2 perfectly circular, charred holes replaced her sockets, a ring of smoldering dark red embers glowing faintly along the cauterized edges. Her body went rigid, the pages of the file slipping from her fingers and drifting down to scatter around Homelander's boots. The moment they hit the floor, the yellowed pages containing the typed fabrications of treason and defection were stained a deep crimson by her gushing blood. She toppled backward, crashing hard onto the marble floor, dying in the exact same manner as the original show. Except in the original show, her death was triggered by Homelander's son. But here, it was brought on by Homelander's father. Homelander stared down at her corpse, the crimson glow in his eyes slowly fading away. He knelt down, gathered the blood-slicked pages from the floor, and without glancing at them, tore them in half, then tore them into quarters, letting the shreds flutter down beside Madeline's body. His eyes welling with tears, Homelander reached out to stroke Madeline's cheek, a genuine pang of grief twisting his features over having to kill her. "Madeline, do you know something? You really are the most talented liar I've ever known," he whispered to the hollow, charred sockets. "I actually thought you were the one person in this world who would never deceive me. But in the end, you still lied to me. And there are some lines you just don't cross. My family, that's my fucking family." He stood up, stepped over her body, and pushed open the apartment door. The heavy door swung shut behind him with a dull, echoing thud. Chapter 34. Homelander cares about approval ratings. The sound-activated lights in the corridor flickered on one after another, triggered by the heavy thud of footsteps. Homelander wasn't flying, he was walking. He had just come out of his apartment, his hands still stained with Madeline's blood. Madeline was dead. Homelander's feelings toward Madeline had never been something that could be easily summed up in a few words. Madeline was like a mother to him. She used to be the closest person to him in this freezing tower, the one person capable of showing him care, even if that care was completely fake. She was the woman who always stood in the front row below the stage, nodding at him whenever he flashed his standard smile for the cameras. He knew it was fake, he had always known. In fact, Homelander's superhearing had caught the sudden spikes in Madeline's heartbeat countless times. When she lied, when she was afraid, when she was scheming against him, that heart hammered like an engine with the throttle slammed floor flat. Every single time, he had heard it crystal clear. Every single time, he chose to explain it away as excitement, just to delude himself. Because she was the only mother Homelander had. Even if she was just a mother in form, he desperately needed one. A person without a mother was like a ship without an anchor, drifting at sea, liable to be blown away by any random gust of wind. But now, he had killed her with his own hands. Madeline had been lying until her absolute last breath, still throwing mud at his father, trying to make him believe that a traitor wouldn't give a shit about more than 100 innocent lives. She had viewed him as nothing but a tool right up until her death. And he, finally, had refused to remain a blinded pussy. A fake mother who had always deceived him, versus a real biological father who genuinely wanted what was best for him. Homelander knew exactly how to choose on that multiple-choice question. Yet, he was still grieving because of it. Inside Vought Tower, the lights in the office of the Executive Director of Superhuman Affairs were still burning. Homelander pushed the door open. Benjamin was leaning back in his office chair, holding a cup of cola. He looked up, spotting Homelander standing at the threshold, his cape hanging askew, his eyes as red as if they'd been scrubbed with sandpaper, and a few drops of dark red liquid staining the cuffs of his suit. Benjamin set his cola on the desk, giving him a thorough look over. "What the fuck is going on with you? Looking like someone just slaughtered your goddamn parents." Homelander ignored the brutal comment where Benjamin effectively insulted himself. "I killed Madeline," Homelander said slowly. Benjamin picked up his cola and took another sip, the expression on his face completely unshifting. "Why? She came to see me." Homelander still stood at the door, not stepping inside, as if waiting for permission. His voice was raspy, his pace slow. "She brought a file, said you're a traitor, a Soviet spy, and that the only reason you came back was to replace me. She said, you never raised me and that we're strangers. She said my drop in approval ratings is entirely your fault." He paused for a moment. "Then, I asked her if Vought was behind my dropping numbers. I asked if Vought had a hand in it. She said no, and then her heart skipped. I killed her, that's all." Benjamin set down his cola. "So you killed her just because she lied?" "Not just that, but because of you too," Homelander said slowly. "She tried to slander you, and Vought tried to slander you. I won't allow it, you're my family." Benjamin leaned back against his chair, falling silent for a moment. Homelander killing Madeline was unexpected, yet it made perfect sense. After all, Madeline was bound to die sooner or later. Even if she didn't die now, she would have eventually ended up dead by his hands for deceiving him in the future anyway. Homelander was already changing because of his arrival. "The play here is obvious," Benjamin said slowly. "Goddamn Vought decided to self-mutilate just to drive a wedge between us, tanking your approval ratings so they could use Madeline to reel your weak ass back in. Going to these lengths to sabotage themselves means they're dropping a fucking fortune on this play. Looks like my arrival has terrified the company, and terrified Edgar too. I get that, come inside, stop talking by the doorway. Homelander finally stepped in from the door, sitting down on the sofa. His posture was still his habitual straight-backed stance, hands resting squarely on his knees. But he wasn't as rigid as before, he leaned his back slightly against the sofa cushions. This was the first time he had truly relaxed his posture inside his father's office. But you did good, Benjamin's tone softened slightly. I was genuinely worried you'd let that goddamn old whore reel you back under her thumb. You didn't, you chose to fight back. For you, that's progress, a damn good bit of progress. Homelander lifted his head, his eyes still bloodshot. But my approval ratings. Homelander was no longer grieving for Madeline, but he was still shedding tears over his numbers. He still cared about his approval ratings, still obsessed over the public's perception. 6 percentage points, right? Benjamin cut him off, suddenly chuckling. Do you know why your approval ratings have always ranked below mine? Even when you were at your absolute peak. Why? Homelander had always viewed Benjamin as his idol, not just because Soldier Boy was powerful, but because Soldier Boy's approval ratings had always been the highest, far higher than even Homelander's best metrics. Because, you pussy, you've never shown your real self, Benjamin said slowly. Aside from a few recent interviews, outside of those moments, you've spent every waking second talking according to the PR department's scripts. I've seen it, your smiles are rehearsed, the angles of your waves are calculated, and when you say, I love you guys, even your pitch is probably corrected by an audio engineer. When you're this fake, pathetic, and weak, it'd be a miracle if your goddamn approval ratings were high. Homelander said nothing, his lips parted slightly, wanting to talk back, but he couldn't find a single point to counter with. Benjamin leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping into a low, heavy register. Only when you stop giving a shit about those useless metrics, stop giving a shit about a goddamn approval rating, stop getting upset because one or two reporters corner you, and stop losing sleep just because some nobody on Twitter calls you a fraud, only then can you become stronger and get what you actually want. Otherwise, for the rest of your life, you'll just be constantly controlled by Vought, by rich fucks, by people in power, and even by the very fans who support you. You're a real superhero, not some puppet to be pulled around forever. You aren't like those whores who spend every single day catering to men, sleeping around with countless people, only to catch a disease and die a miserable fucking death. A real superhero. Homelander was stunned. It was the first time he had ever heard that phrase used this way. Being your true self, rather than performing a fake persona. Vought had never taught him that. Then again, those corporate fucks at Vought were never his family. In their eyes, he was likely just an excellent product. I understand, Homelander said, staring at Benjamin, his gaze steadily growing dead serious. From this day forward, he was going to be his true self, not a puppet manipulated by Vought. Good, then remember that. Be real. Homelander stood up from the sofa. He walked to the door, paused in his tracks, and cast a final glance back at Benjamin. Homelander pushed open the door and stepped out. The sound of his footsteps echoing down the corridor was no longer the heavy, dragging thud from when he arrived. Sitting alone in his office, Benjamin leaned back against his chair, suddenly recalling something. In reality, even in the original show, Soldier Boy's peak approval rating had always remained higher than Homelander's. It wasn't because Soldier Boy was better at managing a public persona, quite the opposite, it was because he never managed one at all. It wasn't until the original show's later timeline, when Homelander completely abandoned approval ratings, stopped giving a shit about those metrics, and delivered that classic line during a speech, I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better, that his raw aura of absolute indifference caused his approval ratings to skyrocket, even surpassing Soldier Boy's peak numbers. After Homelander left, the system's notification chime echoed in Benjamin's ears. Benjamin was filled with anticipation, he desperately needed super speed and super flight. Ding! You have made Homelander feel a father's guidance and teachings. Although he still cares deeply about approval ratings, your instruction has made him realize that only by being his true self can he break free from Vought's control. Homelander deeply envies how you are completely free from Vought's grip, and envies your lack of personality flaws. But along with that envy, he loves you deeply. Reward acquired. Anesthesia Immunity LV6. Current abilities. Nuclear Energy Blast LV4 can release high-intensity radioactive energy capable of incinerating anything and burning away the compound V inside a target's body. Super Strength LV6 possesses the top-tier super strength of elite supes. Super Defense LV5 invulnerable, immune to conventional firearms in most sup attacks. Self-healing LV5 extremely high cellular activity, capable of rapidly repairing fatal wounds. Radiation Resistance LV5 completely immune to nuclear radiation and all harmful rays. Super Speed LV1 possesses the speed of a standard sup. Anesthesia Immunity LV6 immune to the vast majority of toxins and anesthetics, including Novichok. Eternal Youth physical form permanently remains at its peak. Where the fuck is my super speed and super flight? Fuck you, system, fuck you. Benjamin's face was freezing cold as he hurled curses. Still, on the bright side, one of his major shortfalls had been patched over. He wouldn't get knocked out by Novichok, the military-grade nerve agent used to incapacitate Soldier Boy in the original show. From this day forward, aside from flight and speed, he no longer possessed a single weakness. Chapter 35, Massacring the Board. After Homelander left, Benjamin quickly familiarized himself with his new capabilities and dialed Edgar. The phone rang exactly once before it was answered. "Hello, Benjamin." Stan Edgar's voice came through the receiver, his tone entirely indistinguishable from usual, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred tonight. Leaning back in his office chair with his feet propped up on the edge of the desk, Benjamin spun an M1911 he'd dug up from the armory, its barrel gleaming with a cold blue light under the desk lamp. "Edgar, I think I'm really going to rip your head off, along with your families, chop them into mincemeat, and feed them to the goddamn dogs." The other end of the line fell silent for half a second. "It was an accident, Benjamin." Edgar's tone retained that infuriatingly steady composure. "This was entirely Madeline's doing. And Madeline is dead, she got exactly what she deserved. As for the online narrative, Vought International will handle it. Like anyone's going to buy that bullshit. I'd sooner believe you and your family are getting passed around by 10 homeless guys tonight." Benjamin didn't do internal dilemmas, he set the gun down on the desk. "Since you people decided to make a move on my son and me, it's only fair that I strike back, wouldn't you say?" "Calm down, Benjamin, it's all just a misunderstanding." Benjamin hung up. He snatched the M1911, grabbed the shield off the back of his chair, hooked it onto his left arm, and walked out of the office. The late-night streets of New York were nearly deserted. Benjamin didn't call for any transport. He thought it over. Since his speed was only at LV1 and wasn't fast enough yet, he might as well just take a rideshare bike. He scanned a rideshare bike right outside Vought Tower. When he pulled up the QR code, the app flashed a "new user discount" pop-up. He impatiently tapped out of it, straddled the seat, and pedaled off toward Manhattan's Upper East Side. Benjamin had long since memorized the addresses of every single board member. Their home addresses, daily routines, and security details. He had mapped out everything within his first 3 days on the job. His first stop was a townhouse on the Upper East Side. The board member living there was named Howard Kramer, 63 years old, who had served on Vought's board for 22 years, one of the very men who had voted to sell Soldier Boy out to the Russians all those decades ago. Benjamin parked his bike around the corner, jumped the perimeter wall, and popped the back door lock with the edge of his shield, casually knocking out the 2 Secondaire supes stationed there as guards. Howard was reviewing financial reports in his study when he heard a noise and looked up. Spotting the figure in the deep green suit standing at the threshold, the glass of whiskey slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "Soldier Boy, how did you get in here?" "Walked." Benjamin stepped forward and crushed his windpipe with a single punch. Without another word, Howard slumped over the desk, his glasses tumbling onto the carpet, the lenses splattered with his own blood. The second stop was Park Avenue. The third was Central Park West. The fourth, Tribeca. Benjamin navigated through the Manhattan night on his rideshare bike. At every location, he parked around the corner, hopped the fence, did the deed, hopped back out, and kept pedaling. The tracking map on his bike app traced a series of jagged lines across the layout of Manhattan. By 4 in the morning, every single name on the board of directors had been crossed out, save for Stan Edgar. The final corpse lay slumped by the edge of his own swimming pool, his skull completely caved in by Benjamin. Benjamin knelt down, wiped the blood from his hands onto the dead man's suit, then straightened up, watching the moon dancing on the surface of the pool. Why spare Edgar? Not because he was giving him a pass, but because Benjamin wanted to save the old bastard for last. He wanted him to watch Vought get torn down piece by him and Homelander, leaving him to sweat it out in his office every goddamn day, never knowing exactly when that eaglehead shield would come crashing through his door. The only punishment worse than death is waiting for it. Besides, Benjamin needed Edgar around to take the fall for Vought's eventual collapse anyway, so keeping him alive served a purpose. He pedaled the bike back to the base of Vought Tower and locked it. The app immediately threw up 2 notifications. Notification: total trip, 47 kilometers. Calories burned, 830 kcal. Congratulations on breaking your personal record for longest ride. Notification: amount due, $20. Fuck you, 20 goddamn dollars. Why doesn't this piece of shit app just rob a bank? Benjamin stared blankly at the prompt, processed the payment, and jammed the phone back into his pocket. Payday still hadn't arrived. Goddamn Edgar. He'd have to make the old bastard give him a salary advance next time, or he'd just go rob his family. Early the next morning, the Seven's conference room, Vought Tower. The Deep stood outside the threshold, taking a deep breath. He had changed back into his blue and green suit today. Except his head was completely bald. He still had his hair when he got sacked, but driven by pure depression, grief, and fury, the Deep had made a drastic move. He shaved his head and every other hair on his body, sparing only his beard. Still, a bald head had its perks. After pulling over 100 people out of the water yesterday, he didn't even have to wash his hair. Right now, his smooth scalp cast a ridiculous glare under the cold white fluorescent lights of the room. Starlight sat on the left side of the long conference table. Spotting the Deep walking in, her brow furrowed, her fingers tapping a tight rhythm against the tabletop. She didn't have a single ounce of goodwill toward this man. He had tried to corner her in this very room just days ago. But recalling the image of him riding a dolphin to shore under the setting sun over the Atlantic yesterday, she took a deep breath and suppressed the rising disgust. Forget it, the guy had saved lives yesterday. Besides, since Soldier Boy had intervened, the Deep hadn't actually succeeded, or Starlight would have been far more livid. Unlike the original timeline, Starlight hadn't been victimized by the Deep, hadn't crossed paths with Huey, and hadn't witnessed Homelander's unhinged brutality. With Soldier Boy backing her up, she actually still had faith in the Seven at this point. Maeve sat right next to Starlight, clutching a cup of black coffee. She cast a sideways glance at the Deep's bald head, the corner of her mouth twitching slightly, though she kept herself from laughing out loud. A-Train was missing from the lineup, still confined to a hospital bed. Benjamin's punch had knocked loose several of his teeth, but it was his heart that kept him completely sidelined. The doctors reported that the residual concentration of the concentrated compound V in his system had spiked to a critical threshold, requiring at least a month of inpatient observation. Homelander sat to the right of the head seat, which belonged to Benjamin. Scanning the faces around the room, Homelander noted that not a single soul mentioned Madeline. Good. The door swung open. Benjamin strode in, his shield strapped to his left arm, holding a cup of iced coffee. Trailing right behind him was Ashley, the low-level manager from PR. Clutching a thick stack of files and wobbling in a pair of ill-fitting high heels, she was sweating profusely from pure anxiety. Sit, Benjamin said, pointing toward a chair along the table. The exact seat that used to belong to Madeline. Ashley froze. Sir, that's M. Stillwell's. Madeline moved on last night, along with a few members of the board. They've gone to a better place. Benjamin settled into the head seat, resting his shield against the armrest. Starting today, you're running her department. Got a problem with that? Ashley nearly dropped her files onto the carpet. Frantically fumbling to arrange them on the table, she pulled out the chair and sank into it, her facial expression oscillating violently between sheer ecstasy and blind terror. No, absolutely no problem, sir. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down, sir. Seated near the door, the Deep stroked his smooth scalp, his eyes full of confusion. Madeline left, and a bunch of board members left at the exact same time. That's a hell of a coincidence. Moved on to a better place. He gave his head another rub, not that he particularly cared. He didn't have any affection for Madeline anyway, and even less for the board. The only thing that mattered was that he was back in. He was a member of the Seven again. Looking down at the glass of water in front of him, the surface reflecting his bald head like a sea urchin hauled out of the ocean, his curiosity finally got the better of him. He looked up and asked, did they all move to Orlando? Benjamin and Homelander turned in unison, fixing the Deep with a dead, piercing stare. If you want to read ahead and find out what happens next right away, You can get up to 20 chapters ahead on my Patreon on patreon.com/forgottendaoist. To be continued.